Hey everybody, welcome back to Engaging the Phenomenon. And here, this is going to be an old interview or discussion from December 2018 that I did when I was on UFO News Network Sundays, UFONN, with Frank Stalter, and helped organize and plan and have this discussion with John Burroughs, who's known from the Rendlesham Forest case, and he actually co-hosted the show The Phenomenon, or Phenomenon Radio, with Linda Moulton Howe, and of course Grant Cameron, the UFO researcher. So again, some of the information in this is going to be dated. It's from, again, December 2018, but it will be interesting to see the perspective from back then. But of course, I wanted to put this on here on Engaging the Phenomenon because it's a very important discussion, in my opinion, still very relative to this day, and a lot of very good information in there. Also about some of John Burroughs' experiences and everything involved with that. And, we mentioned the DNA study. So again, Frank was kind enough to let me just share it on here, no issues. So enjoy.
And good evening from Philadelphia. Frank here.
And James coming in from West Essex, New York.
And welcome to UFO News Network Sunday on a Wednesday night. We are able to make exceptions for exceptional shows and dig into our normal work week. But tonight we've got both John Burroughs and Grant Cameron with us. John, welcome back. Thanks for coming on board again. John.
Thanks for having me on. My mute button didn't want to work right away. Sorry.
Okay. And Grant, I know you're still basking in the glow of your Jets 7-1 victory Sunday against my Flyers. I thought I was watching a football game. The Jets put 7 up on the board.
That's too bad. I feel sorry for you.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's a long season and it's only one game. So
that's right.
Grant, thanks for coming on back. And let's get down to it. John had mentioned that he wanted to do something like this a while back and had talked about misconceptions regarding Rendlesham. So let's get that out of the way pretty quick. A couple that I'm familiar with, obviously one is the lighthouse. That seems to be accepted as the definitive explanation for the whole thing. Obviously, none of us think that's the case. John, you want to knock that one down real quick for us?
Well, all I'm going to say about the lighthouse is that was the cover early on, and it's been pretty much discredited, other than, believe it or not, based on the technology that was being tested and worked on in the area, the lighthouse itself may have played a factor in it because it was being used actually to transmit EM frequencies from the lighthouse itself with equipment. And the funny thing about it is over the years, all these testing, all this stuff with MK Ultra and everything else that's been going on is slowly being declassified. And if you really look at the meat and potatoes of all these documents, it's pretty scary what we were doing 40, 50 years ago. So you can only imagine what could be taking place today.
Okay. And a second one that I see quite a bit is it seems like a number of people who are inclined to be very interested, or they are very interested in the UFO topic in general, are a little bit turned off to Rendlesham because of Larry Warren. and his involvement and some of the escapades he's gotten involved with subsequently regarding memorabilia and so on and so forth. You've been writing a little bit about Larry recently, and why don't you bring us up to date on where all that is? He's going to be in a documentary coming up soon, Capel Green, so his name is going to be back in the news. So why don't you give us where you're at on Larry Warren and his involvement?
Well, okay, listen, I mean, unless you know the history of Rendlesham, you won't understand Larry Warren. He was the first one to come out, basically, that was stationed over there during the times of the event. He heard about some investigations going on, worked with some of the investigators. So he was the first one to come forward. He eventually wrote a book with Peter Robbins. Most of his stuff in his book has been proven not factual or misleading, to including the fact that, honestly, in his own book, he states he was returning from Germany to night halt, and the group went out into the forest on the third night. But ultimately, what's happened over the years, because it is a big, big mess within what people remember, what happened, what went on, is simply that Larry Warren has been one of those whipping boys that Haltz has always used, Colonel Haltz always used, because he can always go after Warren and keep everything so jumbled and arguing and the arguments going on and stuff that most people, like you said, get tired of it. So it's a case that happened 3 nights for sure. There might have been a 4th night where some strange stuff went on that happened over the Christmas period of 1980. And yeah, I can understand why people can get tired of it, because I don't think we'll ever get an answer, because the reason is they don't want people to know what really happened.
Got it. And Grant, still, I know you're working a lot on the experiencer end of things. John's involved in that. But what's come up since you last been on? You kicked off our show back in April. Update us on that end of things. I know that that is your primary focus in terms of your current research.
Yeah, well, the latest rabbit hole I've gotten into is the whole Apport phenomena, and I have an idea that there's something wrong with the metals, with this whole new story of the metals. Everybody's into
Grant, not to interrupt, but very quickly, when you first dropped that word "apport," I didn't know what it was. I do now from talking to Ray Hernandez. But why don't you explain to the folks what an apport is?
Well, an apport is like what's happening at Skinwalker Ranch. So they've turned it into sort of like this real sort of negative thing. The woman comes home, she buys the groceries, puts the groceries on the counter, goes into another room, takes all the groceries out, goes into another room, comes back. The groceries are all back in the bag. She goes, has a shower, locks the door, has a brush and a towel, comes out, brush and a towel are missing. Brush ends up in the freezer a couple days later. And they have the bulls. The guy's worried about the bulls. Where's the, I hope they don't touch my bulls. He goes running out. The bulls are missing out of the corral. Then he finds them in this trailer that's all locked up. And he's digging a hole. And then he just wipes his brow, and suddenly the hole digger is gone. And he finds it a week or 2 later up in the tree. And these are like where an apport is something that's been moved from one place to another. And it's happened a lot in psychic mediums in the last century and stuff like that. And then you have materialization things. So if you look at the original SRI stuff, and I actually went to Hal and asked Hal about this metal stuff. I'm thinking all the different pieces of metals are all different. Like, what's going on here? And is it possible that UFOs can fly across the galaxy and then start falling apart and pieces are falling off of them? Or is this like an Apport phenomena where they're making things appear? And if you go back to the original SRI funding proposal, it was done, you'll see it was not just remote viewing that they were trying to fund. It was PK. It was this stuff. And that's where you hear where the ASAP program has gone to Skinwalker Ranch. And it really didn't have anything to do with UFOs to start with. It had to do with this bizarre paranormal phenomena of things appearing, disappearing. And that's the whole militarization thing, is if you can make stuff disappear and move through walls and this kind of stuff, this is very, very powerful stuff. And that's what I've gotten into. And I run across very, very bizarre stuff. And it seems to happen quite a bit around experiences. So the whole thing with the Skinwalker Ranch was nothing unusual. This happens around lots of people. Every time I interview an experiencer, I'll say, do you have any weird stuff that falls out of the sky, or stuff that moves from one place to another, disappears and then reappears a couple of days later? And they say, yeah. And then you see in the original stuff with the SRI, and I actually went to Hal Puthoff, because if you look back in the original days when Uri Geller was there, and Uri Geller claims to be an experiencer, he had the encounter with the beings at 3 years old or whatever in the desert or whatever, claims to be this UFO experiencer. If you take a look there, they tell this very bizarre story, and this is an Apport story that Hal knew about in the early days, where Edgar Mitchell's there, Hal Puthoff is there, and they go out to lunch with Uri Geller, and Uri Geller's eating the ice cream, and suddenly he bites down and he cuts his lip on this piece of metal. He pulls the piece of metal out, and Edgar Mitchell looks and goes, what the heck? And he looks and he said, that's part of a pin that I lost in Houston, Texas, a number of years earlier. And he's going like, you're never bringing to Houston. Where the heck did this pin come from? And then later on in the day, I think the same day, they're in the lab and they hear this tink behind them, and they look, and Uri Geller's in another room, and the other half of the pin falls on the floor behind them, and then another piece. And there was all this stuff that was appearing out of nowhere. And that was the part where the PK thing, where they wanted this funded as well. So it wasn't so much the remote viewing. It was this PK thing, which is very, very powerful stuff. If you can make people go through walls and make stuff disappear, reappear, disappear, all this kind of stuff, this is very, very powerful stuff. And it happens all the time. It's not unique to Skinwalker Ranch. If you talk to almost any experiencer and ask them, have you ever had this happen? They will tell you, oh yeah, it happens all the time. And in fact, I had the one where I was interviewing this guy in Laughlin last month, and he started telling me this bizarre story about feathers, and I actually got involved. We got involved, and an incident happened to us at the conference with a feather. It was the most bizarre thing. When it's one thing to hear somebody tell a story, it's another thing when you're part of the story and it actually happens to you.
I know that from the very early SRI work, one of the things that they were looking at was actually to be able to have psychics target Soviet at that point military electronics, and be able to mess with them at a distance. That was part of what they were looking, at least hoping to try to do.
Yeah, that's where they had Swan, where they had that was a photon detector or something, a big detector below the floor, and they said, we're going to give you this test that's foolproof, that you can't fake it, because everybody kept saying that Swan was faking the stuff and stuff like that. And they tell the story about, he said, okay, make the signal change so it's picking up whatever it's detecting, and it has a certain signal. And he said, well, let me look at it. And as soon as he looked at it, almost like the dual slit experiment, as soon as he looked at it, the signal changed. And they told the story that the two PhDs that were running the experiment went running out of the lab. They figured something was wrong with the equipment, and the guy ran into a pole. He actually ran into a pole. He was so upset by what had happened. And that Hal Puthoff said that the Navy had actually come to them, and it was like they were going to lose their funding. I think it was a Navy that had funded this thing, and they were going to lose their funding because you can't even control this program. Like, what the heck's going on with this experiment? And so that kind of stuff is scary, where you heard the Russians were able to, walk into these stories about them walking into a bank and sort of hypnotizing the person and making them do this, or, the whole thing with the goats, can you make a goat's heart stop and this kind of stuff. That was the real scary part, is this PK thing. And you see the original funding proposal that was put out by SRI, it talks about this quite a bit, that this is part of the original funding, and they didn't do that much with it. They did most of the remote viewing, but that's where the Skinwalker Ranch, and that's the Apport thing, and it's a very, very important thing. And there's a lot of evidence. There's a lot of this material that's around all over the place. And so I've been gathering all this material together and talking to various people about their experiences.
James, go ahead.
Yeah, so you think that all these pieces, like the metamaterial pieces that TTSA and everybody's studying, how do you think that's going to turn out?
Well, I think that it's a dead end, because basically they're going to, it's almost like the videos. It's like you're going to look at the videos and you say, there's no way we had this. Something weird is going on. That's about as far as you can go. So I've already heard, you've heard Jacques Vallée talk about it, and it's this whole thing where, some of the isotopes are missing, some are 100% out. these kind of things where they're going to show like there's no way we could create this kind of stuff. But that's the end of the story. And then the skeptics will come and say, well, there's a black ops program that's doing this in outer space or this sort of stuff. So it's going to prove, yes, that this is unique material. We basically couldn't get this. In fact, the Bob White piece that was in 1985, where Bob White, this guy was going to Las Vegas, this piece, he sees this UFO, they shine a light at it, and he shoots this metal out at them, and he picks it up. It's been done by NIDS did the piece. It was done by Los Alamos. There's been 13 years, and now TTSA has the piece. It has all these bizarre characteristics in this piece, but basically it just tells you, yeah, something weird is going on. But in terms of telling you where are they from, what are they doing, my problem with it when I first saw this stuff, and the only one that looks like it may come off a ship is this arts parts piece, this layered 27 layers or whatever it is piece. That looks like it comes off a ship. But if you look at all the other metal, and I've seen a lot, I've actually got 3 pieces myself. When you look at all the other metal, it looks like some blob of metal that it doesn't seem to be coming off a craft. And so if it's not coming off a craft, then you have to look at the other possibilities. What really is going on? Why are these things shooting out metal? Because if you look, there's a lot of these cases. Brazil, it actually started with Maury Island 3 days before Kenneth Arnold. There's 3 UFOs or 6 UFOs or whatever it was, and the one's in trouble, and all of a sudden it explodes. All these pieces of metal are raining down, and it kills this dog, and the guy breaks his arm, and all this metal gets picked up by the U.S. Air Force, and they fly it out and crash the plane, and the big first conspiracy story starts. This kind of stuff was going on before Kenneth Arnold, and it's been going on all the way through. And I think even John referenced the fact that Halt said these dripping metals, where I got Chris Bledsoe contacted me and said, it's not just ejected metals, it's dripping metals. And I got these photographs of the orb is flying along, I think 11 feet off the ground or whatever, and dripping this metal onto the driveway. They scrape up this metal, and apparently Halt had been talking about this, that this is sort of a common characteristic. So is it a UFO that's in trouble, that's sort of shooting out metal to save itself, or is something else going on? And I just saw that almost every single piece is different. They're very, very weird. We picked up one at the University of Arizona. We just ran into this. We were looking at James McDonald's files, and we found this file on this piece of metal from 1939, and it looks like a sort of a dart, and with this big sort of bubbly head on it, and it's 99% nickel, which at that time the nickel people said there's no way we create anything that 99% nickel in 1967. James McDonald didn't know what it was. It was just this bizarre thing that the woman had been given by her father, happened in 1939, and in 1967 NASA had opened a lab because of the space program in Tucson. This woman lived in Tucson, so she took it to the lab to say, maybe you can tell me what this thing is that my father gave me from 1939. Now we know this metal's all over the place. Jacques Vallée said all this stuff's all over the place, and he's going to look at it, and he's going to find that a lot of this stuff is very, very bizarre. But in terms of determining what's really going on, I still maintain that it's not until you talk to the experiencers that you can actually figure out what's going on, that it's a sort of a dead-end road. It tells you, yes, something very bizarre is happening. It's probably not made on this earth, but that's as far as you're going to go with it.
John, news has come out that there's a possible claim from TTSA that they're holding one of these unusual metal pieces from Rendlesham. Do you have anything for us on that?
Okay, they've got one, and there was one, this was about a month ago when I talked to them. They had some kind of material that they already had, and they had more on the way that was being sent to them. But they're very close to the vest on exactly where, who, why, other than they did say that, which is kind of what came out today, I guess, with the conference call or something, and I was briefly reading before we came on the air, where they don't have enough funding, and the funding they needed was the lab and the as far as the equipment to test some of this stuff. And the last I had heard, they hadn't even got to the isotope part of it yet. So yeah, they have something, but they're being very close to the vest on what it is.
So it's up in the air as to whether or not it was material picked up by your Air Force guys, your colleagues of the Air Force, or maybe somebody a local who would stumbled across something and picked it up after the fact.
Well, there was a piece of material that was brought by an Air Force colonel's wife to a researcher in the UK by the name of Ronnie Dugdale that was given to him and he passed it on to some other people. There was a piece of metal or material that he got his hands on. They also did come in right after the event and go into the forest, and they supposedly took samples and did a bunch of stuff, and that was shipped out. So, I mean, it could be from somebody living over there. It could be that piece of metal or whatever it is, material that was passed to Ronnie. It could be the stuff that, that was recovered from the site way back and stored. I would say that, without knowing what they got, if this is really going on, as they're claiming it is, they would have to have some access to some of that stuff right there. That was actually taken as evidence and tagged and held, in the chain of custody.
Got it.
Since we're talking about the TTSA, Luis Elizondo mentioned a debrief for some of the Rendlesham guys. Is there anything about that you can talk about, John?
Well, here's my problem with this whole organization. You meet with them, you talk to them, and they tell you they're not going to talk about something or don't talk about it. And the next thing you know, the next day or a week later, you're reading something, on Facebook or a posting on DeLong's page or whatever. It's piecemeal. It's thrown out there. You'd have to ask him what he meant by a debrief. Have I talked to him? Yes. Did he come and meet with me here in Illinois? Yes. Did we sit down and we go over a bunch of stuff? Yes. Is most of the stuff he went over with me, can I talk about? No, because I gave my word I wouldn't. Does some of the stuff that he presented to me help explain some of this? Yes. Are they planning on putting it out? God only knows. I understand it could happen sometime around the first of the year, from, sometime in February through the end of March, when there's supposed to be another big release, including some documentaries that are coming out. So some of this could come out. But I kind of honor my commitment, and when I'm told something and I'm asked not to talk about it, I don't. But it's kind of like the DNA stuff. I was told that was never going to come out, and bam, it's in Annie Jacobson's book. Do you know what I mean? You got Nolan leaving TTSA, saying he's not going to be involved in much, and now he's going on a speaking tour. So you tell me, what the hell's going on?
Yeah,
tell me, Grant, what's going on?
Well, that's one of the problems. I, as you know, Tom basically went after me at one point that, I'm sort of messing things up and they've got to clean up after me and stuff. And the way I see it is, it's for Tom, a lot of it is like a money game. Like they've got these documentaries, and it's like, so they're playing the game. We'll tell you 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. And immediately everybody goes, well, what's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10? And they say, well, we can't tell you. And they're playing this game of dropping little bits and pieces of it to hype the story, and then they get upset when people are guessing. And what do you expect for people to guess if you don't put it out?
One thing, and they said in their I guess the board meeting today, was that they want to put out more complete information, and starting next year. But go ahead.
Yeah. Then that's exactly what they're not doing. And I can see that they want to hype it. They want to build up the thing where, there's documentaries coming and it's going to have exclusive stuff and we can't talk about it and stuff like that. But then to sort of, as John points out, sort of drop this kind of stuff. And then, of course, I get pieces, because when I heard when there's a Rendlesham piece, I went, what the heck? It really got me interested, because the biggest case that happened where I'm from is the Steve Michalak case, which happened in 1967. And that was the one where the UFO lands on this big, huge rock. This guy's a prospector. The door is open. He puts his head in this thing and he's yelling in there. He thinks it's Americans. Come on out, guys. He thinks it's a secret space program. And he can speak Russian and Polish, and he's answering all these different languages, and the door shuts and the thing sort of starts to spin. He gets hit with this sort of a vent goes by, and his shirt starts on fire. He has this burning pattern. It becomes a very famous case that Project Blue Book.
That's also known as the Falcon Lake case, is it not?
Falcon Lake. Yeah, it happened at Falcon Lake. So that's a very famous case. And then you find out that there was metal at that site. In the cracks in the rock is this bizarre pure silver metal, these pieces of metal. And so when I heard the Rendlesham Forest, I go, that even made me think even more that something different than crafts that are falling apart is going on. It's almost like the old days. Remember Stanton would always say, oh, we got this physical evidence. We got 4,000 trace cases. They land and they look at Rendlesham Forest and they leave the pod marks and all this kind of stuff. That hasn't happened for 20 years. And it's almost like you start to think, are they doing something different, or did they have trouble at Rendlesham Forest, or in these major cases like the Falcon Lake case or Rendlesham. You start to see these cases, and when you go and ask, was there metal? You find out all the time, yeah, there was pieces of metal there too. Almost like as they have the landing trace, they leave the landing trace, and then they leave the metal, and it's almost like a little breadcrumb that they want you to look at and make you scratch your head and make you just go to the next thing. Because if they want to disclose, like the government, the beings, whoever they are, could actually tell us what's going on, but they're using this little breadcrumb thing where they're dropping these little things and making us think, and it's a big mystery. So to the stars, I can't blame them, because Tom DeLonge is not a researcher guy. He's a storyteller guy who sees money in telling stories, and he wants to control all the stories, and so he's hyping it and trying to wants to sell movies and books and stuff like that, and so that's his game. But if for people like John and I, where we were up close to an object, we saw it. I don't give a shit how much money people make or whatever. All I want to know is, what did I see? And when I hear a little story about somebody's got a little piece of metal or something, I start to dig, because I figure you got to go to the people who've got the information. And then people get upset because they leak little bits and pieces, and then they get upset because you get it wrong. Well, too bad. I'm doing the best I can.
People are going to guess, and sometimes they're going to guess right. That's just the way it goes. There's only so many possibilities.
Exactly.
Yeah, and you guys, Grant and John, you guys have turned up some really good information over the last year. Some, especially with the DNA stuff and the experiencer study. I don't even know how you came across that to begin with, but I mean that leads to a whole nother area of
well, the experiencer, like John made the point, the experiencer study, they've been leaking this thing all over the place. I mean, they went to John, they talked to John about it. Then they went to Annie Jacobson. Then there was this Ryan Dubé guy tells the story. Most people don't know that one. He was contacted by Kit Green, and Kit actually flew to Maine and talked to him for an hour about this whole program with the DNA and the antenna and all that sort of stuff. And Ryan was very skeptical. He thought he was being set up. And so you get these guys, and I mean, either you keep it secret or you put it out. Now, I think I've heard some stories that like Jacques Vallée and Nolan want this in the open, that they want the true story told. And if that's true, well, fantastic. But the game thing, I mean, if you want to play the game of secrets, that's why I always say, I know some people who, that have some really top secret stuff, and I made a mistake with getting sworn into secrecy about it. And I say, what difference does it make if John and I and James and Frank, if we all discover it and we don't tell anybody, what does that help the world? That's a total waste of time. The one I had, I got some very high level stuff. One of the TTSA people told me years ago that I knew some of these people for a long time. And then he got upset because I started to talk about it. And I called them MJ12 too. Like, what difference? You had 12 guys that ran MJ12 originally, and they never told anybody, so they knew. And these guys are at some point like MJ12 2.0. They're guys like they hunt wild game animals, and it's like the only people that are ever going to see what they've got. And so they've got some good material from what I've seen, and they're never going to give it. It's a personal interest thing, like this Avery, where they've got classified. They had some aspect. They got involved at some point in the UFO phenomena or the paranormal phenomena, and they were on a study, and now they're trying to figure it out, and they're talking to other classified people, and then they have this cosmic club or whatever they want to call themselves, and they talk privately among themselves, but it's the same as the government. They're never going to tell you what's going on. It's just a game to them. They're trying to figure it out for themselves. Everything I get, as much as I can, I just put it out, because it doesn't really help me to have a secret and to know stuff unless somebody else knows it. That's the whole point of doing the research, is to get it out to the people.
Well, Grant, let's go back to a couple of these things. Okay, if you look at Hal Puthoff, and if you really, a few years ago when I first met him, I always like to look at the people that are contacting me. It's unbelievable, the agencies, the work, and the different fields he's been in, and across the board in religion, Scientology, and all this other stuff. So, and then when I visited him, he has an office that unbelievable library of all this stuff, unbelievable. And everything that comes out, he buys the book and he reads it. Okay. So this guy was deep in the national security state, deep. And his job was to protect, or what they come out and tell us is to protect us, right?
Yeah.
Kit Green, same way. Yeah. He actually briefed presidents. Yeah. And I don't know if Puthoff did. I've never seen that in writing, but I know Kit Green had access to the presidents. His job back when our event took place was Soviet technology. He got an award for some stuff that he did, discovering stuff the Soviets had. These guys are deep into this, okay? And they worked the national security state their whole careers. So why do people believe now they had this, come to Jesus moment and they're going to tell us anything that's of value that's going to jeopardize national security, number one? And number two, why would the government ever allow it to happen anyway? Anything of value, any technology, anything that they don't want other governments to have, or they want to one up on whatever, they're not going to let it out. So why now today do people really believe that this is some kind of disclosure tour or whatever, and eventually we're going to get the truth? Why would they release stuff so these other countries could know the same thing that we do? That's just not going to happen, in my opinion. And most of what's going on is I know DeLong's entertainment and the whole thing was a thing, but these other guys, they're looking for government contracts.
Yeah.
They're not looking.
Yeah.
They're not looking for disclosure. Bigelow summed it up 4 or 5 years ago when he said confirmation, not disclosure. Well, if you read it, you really break it down as well, something's going on. Just like you said earlier, there's these materials, we can't explain it. There's this and that. And then we're just going to admit something's going on and we're just going to let it go.
Yeah. That's
and all that is to get more funding from the people that hold the funding, which is Congress.
Yeah. I think some of them would be guilty of that. And that's what people got to realize is, like Tom is putting out the thing, we're going to build this thing, we're going to go to the stars and all this kind of stuff. But if that
he's going to launch satellites with laser beams. That's what he said that they're working on when they were in Italy, and that's apparently Justice reiterated that today on the conference call.
Yeah, the CubeSats.
Yeah, I think that experiment has already been done. I think they're going to reduplicate that laser propulsion thing. There's actually some videos where they show that this stuff's been done. But the idea of going to the stars is crazy, because if that were true, then you'd have NASA involved. They've got a $19 billion budget. You got the defense has got $713 billion budget. And you can see, who are they briefing? The Senate Armed Services and House Armed Services Committee. John is right. I mean, they're going after, and that's the scary part, is you have guys like Taylor who set up the whole Bob Lazar thing. I mean, here's a guy builds a bomb for 10,000 megatons, which they call the backyard bomb. You didn't have to really move it anywhere because you just detonate it and it would take out the world. And they actually had this thing on a drawing board in the 1950s, Taylor and the first director of DARPA. And you see these type of guys that are pushing for this technology. That's the part that scares me, is when you see some of the stuff that we've had on the drawing boards and the military plans and stuff like that. The technology here and the power of whatever this was going to make nuclear weapons look like matchsticks. And that's the scary part, is if this thing does get pushed through weapon stuff. John is right. I mean, that's where this thing is going, because that's the only guys that got money. If you go to the government and you say to the agriculture department, they go, I don't care about UFOs, or nobody cares. Yeah. The only people that are going to care are the people who see military potential. And that's why the Apport thing is so important, is because this is really bizarre stuff. If you can make stuff disappear and reappear and go through walls, that's really powerful stuff.
But DARPA's already doing that.
Making stuff go through walls?
They're leaking this stuff out slowly but surely. The technology, where they're going with all this, the telepathy, the stuff like that. Even the F-35, that helmet's flown on telepathy.
The mind interface.
They can control 7 and 9 aircraft. The pilot can't.
Yeah, the mental interface.
Yeah.
So guys, Grant, John, whoever wants to shoot first, we hear this plan. 5 to 7 years for the I guess it was a 7-year TTSA plan of where they're going with this. And Tom, when he's talked about it, he says it's leading to disclosure. Of course he has an incentive to say something like that. I understand that. But where do you guys see this going in the 7-year plan? What do you think the 7-year plan is?
Go ahead, Grant.
Okay. Well, I think the disclosure is part of it, because people always look at disclosure, but when you say, like, I know Ron Pandolfi's wife always says,
"Wait, Grant, I'm going to interrupt you just for 1 second. What do you think they're going to disclose, though?"
Well, they have disclosed already. There's an official announcement that the government had a UFO program. That's disclosure. What it comes down to is people always want disclosure based upon what they think is going on. So you have disclosure. It's not the whole thing. It's not they're going to tell you how the atomic bomb is built and how these things work and how the power works and stuff like that. But the disclosure, the fact that they put out that there was a program inside the government, that was a disclosure. That's what a disclosure is. It's to reveal, and they have revealed this sort of thing. And I always believe it's a controlled release, that they've been doing this all along. They did it with UFO Cover-Up Live in 1988. They did it in 1975 with that. They've been doing it all along. The same sort of thing where they drop these little breadcrumb things. And so to me, disclosure, they've already disclosed, and everybody said, well, if people knew that the government was actually lying, that everybody would, it would be people in the street, and absolutely nothing happened. They made this disclosure, and nobody jumped off a building, nobody committed suicide, nothing happened, and they're just going to keep doing that. So I'd say in 7 years, they're going to get closer they're going to be more videos. I heard there's up to 200 videos. I mean, if that kind of stuff, my key thing to this whole thing is, who's greenlighting it? I just do not believe that there's not somebody greenlighting this thing.
Yeah,
when you leave the Defense Department, you do not walk away with the videos as a goodbye present. Somebody in the government is greenlighting. Jim Semivan said that somebody was greenlighting this thing in the Pentagon. There's somebody that's pushing the button that's allowing these videos, that's allowing these programs to be released. And Corbell says, and I heard the same thing. I heard 8 programs. He said there's 4 programs, and you're going to hear about them. Put me on record as being the first guy to say it. And so if 4 more programs are released, that there were 4 other programs, I'd say there's probably 100 programs, because if you're in the government, if you're up at the top, you're not going to out a program and say, stop that program because we're working on it already. Just let everybody do their program, spend their money, and just funnel off whatever comes out of those programs that's good. I'm sure there's piles. It would be totally insane to think that the government is not absolutely up to their neck in programs in trying to figure this out. You and I know it's important technology. We know it's a critically important time in history. They're not that stupid. I mean, they may be, whatever, but they're not stupid. They realize the potential, and they realize that they've got to spend as much money as they can to unravel this stuff, because whoever controls this controls the world. And that's the sad part, is it comes down to who's going to control the world, and weapons and all this kind of stuff.
Well, going into the TTSA timeline a little bit, it seems to me that they set this up as a nonprofit. Whether they set it up as a nonprofit or a for-profit, it doesn't really matter. The key for any kind of organization that's kind of keep moving forward is cash flow. And it seems like the plan was to get the quick cash flow from the entertainment, and then maybe try to get enough money from that to go to this defense contract level. But that's the way it seems to me. That's the plan, and it seems to be working. Like it or not, it seems to be working.
How? How's it working?
You think they've
got that they're generating cash flow. They're keeping their operation going.
Guys, here's the thing that you guys, I'm sorry to tell you, and I was in 27 years in the military. Procurement defense contracts are not negotiated in open press or open negotiations. The real money is, like Grant said, is behind the scenes. Okay. And if these guys have some kind of technology or some kind of formula, like for, warp drive or, interstellar travel and all that, they don't need to go public. You go behind the scenes, you go to Skunk Works, you go to these companies, and you give them a brief on the technology. Then if they approve that, they give you some funding. You go ahead and you start going from there, and the R&D going forward. And this has all been made public now, okay? And that's not
John, real quick. Then what's the point of bringing in DeLong in the first place?
Because here's my take, okay? To go back to what Grant said earlier, okay? And unfortunately, McCain has taken a lot of heat over the years, but he was a good man, and he helped me get my settlement. And when this all happened, the whole thing with me and McCain getting in the middle of it and getting the briefs that he got and some of the stuff that went on behind the scenes, it's still private. Okay, they went to his committee to get the funding. They need the funding turned loose from the taxpayer. And the people that hold the purses are the people in Congress and these committees, okay? So, yeah, the defense companies all have to wait for the funding given from Congress, okay? So now it's no different than the Cold War. Have you looked at some of these projects and stuff? And today's money, it's minuscule, but they were funding different, like 1 million here, 10 million here, 20 million there for all this stuff. The Russians may have had this, the Russians may have done that. We've got to beat them on this. This is a constant thing, and the only way you get the money is to go to the Congress. So if you get these videos out there, you get this stuff going on, you get these experiencers, you get all this stuff going on, Congress would be the ones to give them the money. So they're trying to suck some of the. I'm sorry, what?
I see where you're going with this. Okay.
They're trying
I got
to
two questions.
Okay.
I got 2 questions from there. So, John, do you think that TTSA is serving as like a front?
Look, you couldn't have picked a worse person to do the spokesperson, the chief of staff, and Tom DeLonge. Okay, and number one, I'm sorry, but that's just how I view it. I've watched him. He's a train wreck.
Yeah.
Huh?
The Joe Rogan thing didn't go well. Yeah, he's
a train wreck. And these guys that are behind this, including the guy, I keep forgetting his name, but the guy that's now their chief of staff or whatever that came from Skunk Works, these guys.
Steve Justice.
They don't operate. They don't operate the way DeLonge does, okay? And they registered TTSA as entertainment. So if it fails, no one can get really, what are you going to do, sue an entertainment company? Okay? But if they get a contract, you watch how fast they drop off the map. And all they're trying to do is, this is the space war, guys. The Space Force, the Space War. This is the Cold War going into space now. Yeah. And this is the big bad Ruskies are ahead of us in this technology, and we need the funding.
Or now the Chinese. Don't forget the Chinese, John.
They're going to the moon.
The Chinese might be a little further along in some respects in their space program than the Russians
haven't been in space yet. The Chinese haven't been up in space. They haven't had the space station up there. We've been working the Russians for years on this different stuff, and the Russians were the lead in the first place to put something up into space. The Chinese are light years behind us. Okay, it's no different than they make a big deal about how they're getting a Navy together. They got one carrier that's refurbished from the Russians. They're building 2 more. You know how many years it takes to put a carrier battle strike group together and then make it work? Up until about 3 months ago, the Chinese were afraid to leave the site of land with their carrier group. And the last thing they just did now was they did a line formation. They went across that part where they had that island. They're so far behind, and maybe they can do some R&D and they can come up with this stuff. But as far as operational standpoints, they're light years behind the Americans and the Russians in this.
Okay, let me make a comment. I would say that the Russian thing is the same old scam that Teller used. Why would you build a bomb, 10,000 megaton bomb that would light California on fire? Because the Russians may do it and they'll blackmail us. The Russians have been used forever. The same thing is to hype the money, because you can't have a $713 billion budget to fight Al-Qaeda. Nobody's going to buy it. But if you say the big bad Russians and they've got all these weapons, it's the same hype to push the Russian threat. As to the money with why DeLonge was picked, to me, I always have this disclosure thing that they're doing, this gradual thing. And when Tom DeLonge first was contacted, he was contacted to do this event at Skunk Works, and they said, "Would you like to introduce the president?" He said, "Yeah, if I can get 5 minutes with him." And then he gets moved to a skiff and the president doesn't come in. The first question, the head scientists are talking to him. He hasn't used the word UFO, and they said to him, "So what's with the website?" And if you go back to 2011, 2012, 2013, and you see the Strange Times website that Tom DeLonge had, it was like the National Enquirer for UFOs. It was, the world's coming to an end in 2012. A woman from another universe is here. All this kind of stuff, and that's why they picked him, because it's the same thing. That why did they pick Bob Lazar? Bob Lazar didn't have a security clearance. He was on the base in 2 weeks. It takes 560 days to get a top secret security clearance. He gets brought on the base. He doesn't have have the credentials he's supposed to have. They put him on there because when the story breaks, everybody's going to say the guy, you know, was running a cat house. His wife committed suicide. He would file bankruptcy. He's a totally crazy guy. He doesn't have security clearance. He doesn't have the MIT degree. He doesn't have any of that kind of stuff. And this thing all falls apart. It's the same thing with Tom DeLonge. He's the perfect candidate they have because you want plausible deniability. If you want the story out, you go to the New York Times editor, you give them all the photographs, the videos and stuff, and it's over. They're not disclosing. They're doing this gradual thing where they're putting out stuff and it's all plausible deniability. So they give it to people like John Lear, to Bob Lazar, to Tom DeLonge. They pick people who have plausible deniability that when the story comes out, it's all going to fall apart and everybody's going to run and say it's a hoax, and the story gets out, but nobody takes it seriously.
So basically, if I'm getting you guys right, you seem to be roughly in the same position here, where you think that the long thing is to get the public worked up, and they'll put pressure on Congress, and Congress will loosen up on the defense spending money, and some of that will fall into the laps of guys who are involved in TTSA.
No. I don't think.
Okay.
I don't think it's to get the public worked up, because what did they do? They came back out a couple months ago and they said, don't contact your congressman about this. Okay. The wheeling and dealing that's going on is you've got this old guard that was around in the Cold War. They know how to manipulate this stuff. They know how to get these contracts. They know how to throw stuff up against the wall that's theory only. Okay. And what's going on here right now is there is a race to space. That's why they called it To the Stars. It's to go out into space. It is to go out for whatever reason, whether it's they know something's going to happen here eventually, whether they know for a fact or just, you know, the odds are it is. And we need to get a colony or get people out into space to continue to, you know, to have mankind a seed somewhere else. But the ultimate deal is they're using the same game plan they did with the Russians, with the whole race. I mean, come on. Do we really need a Space Force? No. The Air Force can handle it, okay? The Air Force could go and handle this. You know, they were the ones that have always, the Navy and the Air Force do the flying, the Marines somewhat too. They can handle this. They don't need to create a new Space Force. They don't need to come up with all this new funding, all this new weaponry and stuff. And how much of it really works and doesn't work. So we don't know. And I know what worked back in 2004, and I can't talk about it. So even the stuff that does work, they're never going to let you know. So all I'm getting at, this is a race to get funding to further the defense industry to take us out into space. Do I ever believe disclosure is going to happen? No. Do I believe for 1 minute, like Kit Green said in Mirage Man, he said, well, for years they made this look really, really bad, and they put all these videos, these movies, these books out, and then someday it'll come out, well, it's not so bad, and everybody will accept it. Okay? Well, what are we going to accept? Do we even really know what we're dealing with for sure? I mean, what proof do we have that we know 100% what we're dealing with? Okay. But the next question is where are we getting all this technology and stuff? So my point would be some of it has to come out, because how can we go from rocket fuel engines to zipping around where supposedly we could be in a decade or less? Because that's what the guy, I forget, who's the guy that was smoking dope and all that, the Tesla guy or whatever? What's his name?
Elon Musk. Elon Musk.
Yeah, Musk said he's been exposed to some technology in the last 90 days that he says that, you know, it's going to take us to the next level. So how all of a sudden, can you imagine this? Where are we going to, all of a sudden we're going to go from rocket fuel to, you know, whatever?
You got to explain that somehow.
Yeah, you got to explain it. Okay.
So,
all right, you got to explain it. And here's my next thing. Bigelow goes on 60 Minutes, drops his little bombshell. Then later we have a New York Times article. How come 60 Minutes has done no further investigation into this? How come there's been no follow-up?
Nor the New York Times.
Well, who knows what the New York Times, what they're doing, because they did lead the story. Maybe they are looking at something. But by now, how fast does something big come out in 60 Minutes doesn't dig into it and have something out within 90 days?
Yeah.
How come there's nothing out on that?
Well, you had all the controversies. You have all the people fighting about what the name of the program is and all sorts of accusations and stuff like that.
But isn't it a 60 Minutes job to go in and figure that out? Isn't that
But
what
only if they know there's a true story. Anybody I've ever dealt with in the media, I've never run across anybody in the media who wasn't really interested. It's just that they have other stories to do. It's not their major thing. It's not like they're not consumed with story like you and I are. I mean, they basically get the Billy Cox told me my editor basically tolerates what I do. He was doing a weekly blog thing, but his editor, it wasn't his editor was a bad guy or anything. The editor just couldn't have cared less. It's like, I can't figure out why you guys are into this stupid stuff. And I think with To the Stars, we got to realize there may be different reasons for different people. Like Tom DeLonge is wants to control the story, so he claims he's got the lifetime rights for Bob Lazar's story for the book, and so to him it's a story. He was going for Chris Bledsoe because he has this magnificent story. To him, he's doing a storytelling thing. If you have Nolan, it's an experiencer. Put Off, I heard, maybe an experiencer as well. So they have a different motive for why they want to do this. I saw some stuff before the game in town was Joe Firmage. Joe Firmage has this vision in his bed. He has this guy come to him and this being in the middle of the night. And he said, I want you to help me get to space. And the being looks very upset. And he said, why should we help you? And Firmage says, because I'm willing to die for it. And he basically quits his .com billion-dollar company and starts, and he's got piles of money. And I've seen a video. I know for a fact that Put Off and Kit Green were in there promoting this thing. And it's the old deal. It's like you need the money. If you're a scientist, you're not going to work for free. So these guys, they know you need a contract. So with the Tom DeLonge thing, they figured they were going to gather $50 million. They only gathered $1 million. Then they took the ticker off their website because it basically showed they weren't getting the money. That was sort of a dead end. They thought they were going to get $50 million. Everybody would be all over the story. That didn't happen. But they do need money to run these programs. Put Off, and these guys are big time scientists, and they're always looking for money. So they were after Firmage. When Firmage ran out of money because he couldn't levitate a thing 1 inch off the table, then they all heard about Tom DeLonge and that he had some money, had some inside contacts with the government. Then they realized there's going to be some money and some information that if Tom DeLonge is talking to high level people, that's why the Avery existed, not because it was some secret group. It was a bunch of people who had encounters with the phenomena and who figured out that other people were talking to Bill Moore, and they said, well, let's talk together, and they could talk to each other without things being, because they all have security clearances, and they're all trying to figure it out. Like I had heard the story that Kit Green, because he's a physiologist, always wanted to be briefed on the alien autopsy, and he could never get briefed on the alien autopsy. So there's these kind of things where just because you're a top CIA guy, it doesn't mean you know everything. And when you get a program where suddenly they realize, oh, the government is dealing with Tom DeLonge, and there's this high-level CIA guy that's there and all these other people, then they realize there's going to be money there and there's going to be information. And that's why I think a lot of these people have gravitated to Tom DeLonge, because they believe that there's going to be money and there's going to be material and government sources who are talking. And that's why I say the main story to this whole thing that has never been released is who's green lighting the material. Somebody inside the government is providing videos, documents, and information to the stars. It's not Lou Elizondo. He's out of the government. It's not all these other guys are retired. It has to be somebody inside the government who is green lighting these releases.
Well,
How high can this? How high can this?
Given up?
Real quick, how high can this person be? I mean, it's not going to be a Secretary of Defense. They come and go fairly quickly. Is it as high as a Joint Chiefs level? Is it less than that? Where might this person be in that gigantic hierarchy?
Well, that's the critical thing. Is there an MJ-12? Is there a group there? Because you always hear these stories that there's a division in the whether they want thing to go more into the black or more into the white world. I still think the president. I hear the president is briefed. I've heard lots of stuff. I believe the president. He may not be involved, but he signs off on it and says, yeah, go ahead, do this kind of stuff. That's what I heard about Trump. He really wasn't interested, but yeah, you keep the program going. It was a program that's always run, but you're going to have, that's the key thing, is who's green lighting the program. Who's the guy that's pushing the button? The idea that these videos, they say it's declassified, but John will confirm that just because it's declassified doesn't mean you can get it out. There still is a paper process to get the material out of the government. There's some way that I call it the high hurdle. There's some way that they're getting this stuff out. Somebody is saying, yes, okay, we're going to provide this. And in fact, if you ask Lou Elizondo, you say, okay, are you releasing the videos? And he said, no, I'm not releasing the videos. And you say, is To the Stars releasing the videos? No. To the Stars is not releasing the videos. And then they say, who's releasing the videos? And he said, the government. And then they say, well, who's the government? And then Lou Elizondo says, well, you'd have to ask the government. And that's this circle thing. Who's actually pushing the button and approving this program? Because somebody, I maintain, absolutely, somebody approved this thing to happen. If you want to cover it up or disinformation, you are not going to get this thing going. And go to the New York Times, the Washington Post, and Politico, who all went on the same day, and they all went on Saturday, which is the worst day to do a press release. Nobody releases anything Saturday morning. And the other thing was, it was December. The New York Times actually went in their print edition on December the 17th, which was the same day they shut Blue Book down. So it's basically the same day. It's a week before Christmas. All the reporters have gone on holidays, and you see these patterns of this fact that this is not happening randomly. You do not have three major newspapers who have never done UFO stories suddenly all do a story that takes 2 months to do, put it on the front page, and then you go to the New York Times December 18th edition, and you see that the story originally told was Leslie Kean, and Lou Elizondo was there with his back to the wall and stuff. And if you read the December 18th New York Times story written by Blumenthal, you say that Leslie Kean had been taken to Washington and that there was multiple former and present CIA intelligence officials and a contractor in the room. So this was a program that was fed into the New York Times, into the Washington Post. None of those people would have gone. The Washington Post guy had 2 Pulitzer Prizes. They would have had 2 independent sources inside the Pentagon. So the Pentagon, somebody greenlighted it. Now, I don't know who it is. That's, to me, is the key thing, is who's greenlighting this. And every time you try to go there, they just walk around the thing and say,
but they're
waiting.
Greenlighting this not for UFOs, guys. I'm sorry, I don't believe that. They're greenlighting it to get funding, a bigger defense budget.
I agree, sure.
And they're doing this on the threat of another country, and now China's been thrown into it. But operational, China's not even close to being ready to challenge our country or the Russians.
Okay, but John, when they did the Senate intelligence briefing, Nick Pope said that the Defense Intelligence Agency went in and gave a briefing to the Senate. They don't need to go and make a big spiel all over the United States and risk the whole cover-up. They can go and give a briefing and say, we got the Skinwalker Ranch. This is national security. In fact, according to Pope, the Defense Intelligence Agency did go into the Senate Appropriations Committee, or the Senate Armed Services Committee, and give a briefing, which means that's an official briefing given to the Senate. So they know that the DIA can make their own case and say, we need this because the Russians have got it and we can get these weapons and we're, Well,
I'm going to explain something to you, Grant. Okay. Chuck Takara was a CNN reporter. He then left CNN and went to work for the government. And he worked for Yoda, the guy that was the head guy for advanced technology that just retired during Obama, and I can't think of his name now, but his nickname was Yoda. He was in charge of the top think tank inside the Pentagon. And here's what Chuck told me. He said, okay, we want all this money. We want all this technology. But ultimately, are we going to spend $500 billion on a laser system that doesn't work when it's cloudy or rainy? And we've got to dump all this more money into R&D and to make it advance, or are we going to stick with the bullets, the shells, the old technology that's a lot cheaper, okay? What did Trump say when he first came into office? Why do we need the F-35? Let's stick with the F-15, the 16, and the 18, okay? So these guys want all this money. They want all this money. We're already 22 trillion. Our country's in debt, 22 trillion. It's growing, okay? We have the strongest military in the world, technology-wise and everything else. What they're proposing right now is probably several more $1 trillion to do all this and to go into space, okay? So to get these guys in Congress to listen, you have to put some of it out there in the public end to get them to seriously consider this. Now, if you look at what they've said, and forget DeLong, that's why I don't like him. He's a nutter. I mean, he's hurting them more than he's helping, in my opinion. But these guys are going in there with these briefs on technology, where the other countries stand, where we need to be, and how much money we're going to need. Okay? And that's what they want. And so, but they have to put this somewhat in the public, because otherwise, why is Joe Schmo congressman on his committee going to ever give the money up if bullets still work really well, and we don't need to go that far into space. I still
One
don't
reason
understand
when
why we need to
John,
go out into deep
just to
space
jump in,
to
you
this
asked a
day.
question. I do local jobs. That would be one reason. That's why the military-industrial complex is so successful. You look at a guy like Sherrod Brown, and he's generally not very pro-military, more interested in social issues. But when they try to close a tank plant in Ohio, there he is. He's all of a sudden Mr. Tank. So that's why the military-industrial complex has always been so successful, because they provide local jobs for these guys' constituents.
Well, John, let me ask you, why do you think the military wants to go to space? I don't see it, because you guys you can't even go to the space station. You need the Russians to get you there. You really have nothing in terms of space. The NASA only has a $19 billion budget. Nobody's really except for satellite stuff. When George Knapp did the interview, when George Knapp did the interview with the guy, the head guy with the skin, or the what do you call the Area 51 guys? The head guy, he said, well, what do you think's actually going on there now? And he said he could almost guarantee that it's all subsonic and it's all drones. So if I'm in the military and you come to me and say, we want to go to space, well, what do you want to go to space for? We're here fighting terrorism and stuff, and you're running this war that I think most of the money is going to drones, and it's going to subsonic thing. We don't need supersonic stuff. We don't need an F-35. It's true. I mean, it's all these toy things, and except for the weird type technology stuff, I really don't think they really have anything. And the more I see stuff like Joe Firmage is trying to levitate something 1 inch off the table and he can't get it off. And I've talked to his head engineer. I've talked to the people around him, and you got Bob Bigelow's got $1 billion, and he's just building little sheds that he's going to put on Mars. You got Elon Musk is using 5,000-year-old technology rockets to go to Mars. I don't think they really have anything. This is all just hype that they've got all this super high tech stuff and they're in outer space and stuff like that. The more I look at it, the more I think they really don't have anything, and it's just this giant mystery, almost like Eric Davis. And maybe Eric Davis has to be put on the record, because Eric Davis said, and here's a guy with a security clearance, and I know Eric Davis for many years. I know he knows a lot of stuff that a lot of people really don't know, and he's been around hell put off all these years. And he said they shut down the Cross Saucer program in 1989. He said the stuff is not kept at Area 51. He seems to be putting out stuff that he probably shouldn't be putting out, and that seems to be what I'm coming to the conclusion is, like, no, they really haven't gotten anywhere in terms of the stuff that they actually shut the program down, that they don't really understand this. It's way beyond them, and that's why they went to the Skinwalker Ranch. And what happened to Skinwalker Ranch? They basically, these black ops guys were just shut down. They couldn't film anything. The phenomena was way ahead of them every step of the way. And I think a lot of it is just hype. It may be to get money. And I still think that all these people are in for different reasons. That just because some guy inside some department wants his budget for whatever he wants to do and he wants money, that doesn't mean that Tom DeLonge wants that or that Gary Nolan wants that. I think everybody's in it for their own sort of reason, and there would be 100 different reasons why this program is moving along.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Okay, a lot of this is going to take place from the private side. Okay, now I think this will be the biggest or the most interesting thing that may, if it ever comes out, a lot of this is going to take place 20 years from now. Most of these major companies like Google, and all these other companies were probably funded by the CIA. They knew this was coming. Some of this money that they can't account for in defense was probably funneled to these companies. Okay, now these companies were given this money, seed money, and some of the brightest minds were allowed to operate creatively, because once you get sucked inside the Pentagon, and their rules and regulations and red tape and government stuff, you can never make things work. So they at least give the government some credit for this. They went out, found some of the brightest people, gave them some seed money, and they've let them move forward, and they control all this technology. So then you get you get these private or publicly traded companies. You get all this investment money in this. You've got, they're going with Musk and all these guys that they're working on this. You got Bigelow with his little thing that he first tried 5-7 years ago, tried to say it was hotels they're going to put in space and send people up into space. And as soon as I saw that, I couldn't quit laughing. And now they've come clean, and they're going to use it for Mars, the moon, if he gets a contract, and even to transport people between and stuff. And in between, okay, you can put 20 rockets on the way up there, especially the heavy lift stuff, to building one ship, okay? Or one, ship that's got the better technology, EM frequencies and whatever they're using, whether or not it's going to be warp drive or not, because of the funding. But you've got to get some of this funding, and you got to get these private people involved. But ultimately, to get the money, I still keep saying this, you've got to get the people in Congress to sign on board.
But Frank brings up an issue which Bob Bigelow brought up in an interview which he did with Art Bell a long time ago. And that is the idea that not only do you have guys who, this is the old thing about this article is written, thanks but no tanks, where they couldn't stop the A1 from being built because you had a congressman in there. And you're going to have inside the government, just because you got a good idea and you say, oh, we got this new technology, you're up against the guys who have the contracts now, and they're going to shut you down. And Bigelow tells the story because Art Bell asked him, well, why are you using a Russian rocket? And he said, because we don't have any American rockets. He said, well, we shut down all these nuclear missiles. We have all these rockets. And then Bigelow says, well, they drove over them with front end loaders. And he said, they did what? He said, yeah, they would not allow us to use American rockets because it's going to conflict with the guys who are making the new rockets. So we drove over all the rockets that we had with bulldozers. And that's why Bob Bigelow went to the Russians for rockets to launch his stuff. And the first one they sold him was the one that had the warhead for Las Vegas. And Art Bell says, are you kidding? He said, no, I was serious. They sold me this one. And that's because the Russians, they don't have the big industry. They have to reuse stuff. But the Americans, they just bulldoze it. So if you have an idea, you're up against the F-35, you're up against all these other guys who have the money. They're not going to allow you to walk in. The same as you're going to have these people who believe it's the devil. You're up against a lot of opposition inside the government. Even so, to go and sell it, you're selling it to a bunch of people who have private interests and are getting funding from other people already. It's going to be a very hard sell, even if you've got a good idea that you think is going to work.
Agree, but here's the thing. If you get the brightest to sign on board, like I'll give you an example. Okay, Nolan got very upset with me when I went on the air a couple of times and said that if what you're working on was true, it would be a hell of a weapon for the government to use. And he told me that if I continued to push this, that it may lead him to even leaving the whole thing, okay? Because there's people out there that would be sending him death threats and all that. Why are you developing this if it's going to lead to bad things, okay? But if you get the brightest people out there, you give them the seed money, then you own them, and you keep them outside of the government control and FOIA and everything else. And then eventually you get private industry, i.e. it's really still the government, but it's being funded through the government and private industry to do all this. Okay, you're ahead of the game, okay? But ultimately, the problem is now, where are we going to get the money? What necessitates us to go out into deep space? What's
I can't see them. I don't see why they're going to go to deep space. Doesn't make any sense.
Well, let me get in here now and say, so you guys, what do you think their actual concern is about the phenomenon? What do you think they have legitimate concerns and they're trying to do all this so they can study it more, or so they could maybe, if they feel threatened, they can protect themselves? I mean, what do you think the phenomenon's role is in this and how they're reacting to it?
The phenomena or the government?
The phenomenon. What the phenomenon's role in this? So what do you think the government is doing in lieu of the phenomenon?
I really don't understand your question.
Like,
Well, I think that
kind of talking about this from so we're kind of talking about this from an angle. It's like, you got the U.S. and the Russians and the defense money, but how much of this has to do with the phenomenon? Well,
I think there's been some concern expressed that if a military rival figures out how some of this stuff works, that would give them a decided advantage. I mean, that's been discussed pretty openly.
Yeah, but that's all promo. That's all public relations. And so you do as a threat. Like Corbell talked about it. He broke the Nimitz story. He was on it before anybody else, and he said they were called AAVs. And he said the minute the story broke, it was changed to AATs, Advanced Aerial Threats. And it's the whole deal is you're not going to sell anything to the government unless you have a selling point. And it's the old thing, create a need and then fill it. And you have to have a need. So you say there's these evil aliens out there and they may get us and we got to get it before the Russians, and the Russians may have this technology and they're coming to get us. And that's the way you get a $713 billion budget, by having all sorts of enemies and all sorts of threats that you need to take care of. And I've got the weapon that will do it. And that's how you sell it. Otherwise, nobody's going to buy it.
And Grant, this is coming from internally, where the military says they want this, or this is coming from current private sector suppliers, like, well, let's say Boeing as an example, or McDonnell Douglas, or whatever the case may be. Do you have an idea where this pressure is coming from?
I
really don't understand what you're getting at, though.
Well, I could kind of throw it at you, Frank. Okay. 6 months ago, when Trump, 5 months ago, whatever it was, threw out the Space Force, Mathis didn't agree with it. Quite a few people inside DOD were against it. Then about 4 months later, everybody changed their tune. Okay. Now, my take is that part of what changed their tune was the briefings they were getting, not from Tom DeLonge, okay, but from Putoff, Green, and, Justice and those guys that were up there, maybe Lou and some of the other stuff, whatever was being opened up to them. Now, I know, Grant, you want to say the president knows everything, but they have a need to know. What I mean need to know is they need to know everything when it's relevant, okay? So let's say Trump comes in, he don't give a rat's butt about aliens. You know what I mean?
Right.
Okay. So he may get a defense briefing and get briefed on a program or whatever, but they're not going to break down the entire program, the funding, where it's going, and everything else. Do you know what I mean? So what I'm getting at is something got Trump to want to do the Space Force. Something got Mathis, who comes out and says, I'm a no-nonsense guy. We don't get played. Not in my DOD. But he changed his tune.
You mean the Secretary of Defense, Mattis?
Yeah, Mathis. Yeah. He's old school. So there's something being briefed up there that they want a Space Force, okay?
Yeah.
And that we need to get out into space. Now, they've never really said what the objective is. Well, the only thing they've said was NASA said, well, there's minerals that we need in Mars and the moon. But they just came out with that. And my point was, well, that's what I've always heard. My things I was told was, whatever technology they think they can develop, those minerals lie up there.
Yeah, that's pretty far for me. I mean, that's crazy stuff. We're going to
why would NASA? NASA just came out with that and said, one of our objectives is to go to the moon and Mars to mine minerals.
They have a $19 billion budget. They almost, it's not zero, but it's getting pretty close to zero. They have no money. They have nothing.
But that's because the Space Force is going to take it over.
But it's going to be a military. It's going
to be completely a military operation, which means whatever the briefings were, whatever's taking place was, the idea now is private industry will work with NASA. The military is going to handle everything and guard everything, and we're going to colonize the Mars and moon. But NASA openly admitted one of the objectives was to get to Mars, was to mine minerals.
But NASA makes up all sorts of stuff. They're always got a proposal, because if they don't have a proposal and say, we have a need, we got to go get minerals, we've got to go and back to the moon or whatever, nobody's going to give them any money. They're always pitching some sort of crazy program. We got to do this, we got to do that, and get everybody excited.
Go through NASA. It's going to be, the NASA's job is going to be to train the astronauts. It's as simple as that. They're going to run the training part through private industry. The military's taking this over. Mathis signed off on it now. Why? What is going on? What is going on? What threat has been exposed to these guys that they didn't know about prior, because they scoffed at the Space Force and everything else 6 months ago, and now they're all signing on board? What briefings have taken place? What kind of technology has been introduced to them? What kind of threats been given to them? And now all of a sudden they've agreed that we need to fund that. And now he just went back to Trump and told him that they were going to freeze the budget or barely increase it. They want another $50 billion next year.
Yeah, well, that's the way it works in defense. You want $1 trillion, $2 trillion, $3 trillion. You just want more. You create a need and then fill it. So whether it was Russian satellites or whatever they hyped in that meeting, they sold somebody on the fact that we need some more money. And okay, let's just borrow another $100 billion. What's the big deal? Everybody wants a bigger budget in the Defense Department. Nobody wants to cut down and do with less. I mean, you can create some need and get a new enemy and get another 30 billion and hire some more people and get more executives and have a bigger pay increase. And that's how the defense, even this whole thing that the defense budget, the United States defense budget went up 1 year, almost as much as the Russian defense budget. In one, just the increase was almost as big as the Russian defense budget. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable how much money's put into defense. Now, do you think they need $713 trillion? I mean, would we have that many enemies around the world? I mean, the Russians have low technology. Terrorism is almost gone, and yet we've got this thing where we need, 713. The world's coming to an end because they're able to sell it, and everybody wants low taxes and they want a big defense. Nobody's going to vote against big defense or a tax cut.
I agree, but that's what I'm trying to get. My point is, there's not going to be disclosure. This is simply to get more money for defense.
Yeah, and I agree. For certain people, that's what it's about. I can make some money. I can hype this thing. But I say disclosure happened on December the 16th. It wasn't disclosure that maybe you're defining, but it was disclosure. Disclosure means to reveal. They revealed they had a program, and that was never revealed before.
Yeah, but the program itself was muddied down because which program was it? What was the name of it? What was it really doing? What really is it that we're viewing? We've only seen, 3 videos, and at least one of those was leaked years before to the Germans. Okay. So we have these videos that show something that we can't really tell what it is, but it's on gun camera footage. But realistically, that was not a cleaned up version. So whatever was leaked was just leaked enough to make people look at it to say there's something there that we don't have. And then, oh, by the way, we'll give you the real brief because the DOD's now going to go to these guys in Congress. And like you said, DIA, and they're going to say, here's what we're really dealing with.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. So, but they did do the thing where they put it out enough to get the thing going. And in behind the scenes, they're trying to gather money. But if they wanted it out, and if they really wanted everybody to know exactly what the program was, they would have given all 3 newspapers the right name. They would have given the records. They would have given the documents. They didn't. They're doing this half-baked thing. It's not disclosure, and it's not cover-up. It's this half-baked thing where they're releasing things all in a big cloud where nobody knows what's going on. And meanwhile, in behind, some people are trying to get more money in the defense budget. I absolutely agree with you.
And not only that, here's the other thing that caught my attention. When they released their public statement for funding, and they said they didn't even think that it could last another year.
Yeah.
Now they sold off.
Now who is that? John, who's that? When you say
that was
public statement,
financial report.
Oh, you're talking about the TTSA. Okay.
Right. So they said that they may not last another year. They sold off the entertainment part of it to, I'm not sure, I think it was A&E, because that's who's going to run these documentaries, which is through the History Channel, but A&E. So they sold off that portion of it for the videos and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
So now I had a friend of mine who's an accountant and has no skin in the game. He's not into this stuff. He just looked at it and he said, yeah, there's a good possibility this is all going to collapse on him in less than a year.
And
so,
the other thing, if
it disappears, they're going to get their contracts and life goes on.
Exactly. And that's why they used Tom DeLonge. That's why Tom DeLonge's had the 3, had the balloon one in the first one. And then Lou Elizondo said, Jim Semivan said, we'll straighten this. We'll make sure we get it right the next time. Then he goes on to Rogan's show and he shows that TR3B nonsense. And then they go to Italy and they show the 1952 thing was phony. Yeah. So why didn't they not correct them? Because they want him to make mistakes. They want him out there making all this stupid stuff because it's this plausible deniability. It keeps people thinking, well, is this really for real? The material's getting out, and yet people jump on these things. If they wanted him to get the true story, they would stop him from doing stupid things like he's doing. They would rein him in. They're not reining him in for a reason.
Well, let me ask both you guys this really quick. Now, what is all in this for somebody like Hal Puthoff? I mean, the man is in his early 80s. He's not a kid anymore. I
He's
mean,
got kids.
okay, that's your reason. Okay.
No, he's got a company.
Yeah, he's got his son. I know his son.
He's
His
got
son
his
works
kids.
at Earth Tech.
He's got a company. He's got Eric Davis, and he's got other people that are younger than him. And I guarantee you, when he passes, the company's not going to fold.
Okay.
And neither are some of these other people that are involved with Justice and those guys and stuff like that. I go along with you, Grant, on this. I think this was, how do I want to word this? I think this was put out to, yeah, they're going to educate people that there's more to it and to get people to understand why we need to go into space. So the entertainment part is there'll be some serious documentaries that'll come out with no classified information, but they're going to talk to different people. Here's what happened. This is what went on. This is what we're doing. This is where we're going. This is why we need to go into space. This is what the threat is. And then what you're going to see is the company's going to go away. It's going to dissolve. DeLong's going to have egg on his face, and these guys are going to get their contracts to build the next generation or whatever defense stuff that they need. And we're going to be left with confirmation there was a program, but anyone who's got any intelligence at all has to know that inside our Department of Defense and any other major military in the world, they're scouring the skies in space every single day. And anything that's abnormal, they're going to want to know what it is for different reasons. So they're going to have programs to do this.
Let me answer because I've dealt with some of these people over the years. I've dealt with Hal maybe a dozen times over 20 years. And I think people like Hal and Kit Green, who probably the two guys have probably the longest, one of the longest held top secret SAI clearances in the country from the 1970s. I know, like I'd recovered some documents from correspondence with Art Lundahl, and most people have no idea who Art Lundahl is. And Hal contacted me, said, "Have you got correspondence with Art Lundahl? Could you send me a copy of it?" And so I sent him this thing. I think Hal and Nolan and Green are people who are just really, really interested. They had some sort of contact, whatever it was, and they're determined, just like you and I. Why are you and I falling to the stars? Why are we chasing this? Because we're trying to find the answer. And when they realized that there was government people dealing with Tom DeLonge and they were going to put this material out, they said, let's go and find out what's going on here. Let's get in there. Let's get some information. I think a lot of these people are just honestly guys who, like Hal Puthoff, he's been working on it his whole life. He's just determined. He's trying to figure this thing out. He's trying to figure out how the propulsion system works. I've heard all sorts of stories, and every time I've gone to him, he's been very honest with me. For example, you asked about government documents. I asked him at one point. I said, Hal, because there was never any government documents or UFO documents in the presidential libraries. So I realized that he had done the remote viewing. So I said to him, Hal, was the president briefed on remote viewing? And he said, until 1988. He gave me the date. Until 1988, yes. He's very short on his answers, and basically, I think that's when he sort of was out of the program, and so he basically confirmed him. Yes, the president was being briefed on remote viewing, and there's no documents on that. So Hal is a guy, from my experience with him, he's just tremendously interested. He's fascinated with the subject, and just like you and I, they are trying to find out who's got the answer. And when they hear Tom DeLonge may have some government contacts, some government money, they jump in there just the same as you and I are trying to figure out what they're doing. They have a little bit different opinion than you and I may have as to what's going on. They're a little closer to the action than you and I are. But it's like every time you get a chance to talk to Lou Elizondo, are you going to turn it down? Absolutely not. Even if you have some suspicion that he really is not on the level or he doesn't know or whatever, you're trying to find out what the answer is. And I think there are some answers in this To the Stars organization, no matter how badly it's being run.
Just going back to a name that I believe, Grant, you brought up briefly, but didn't spend a lot of time on. Has your position on Jim Semivan? I remember you talking about him having a very negative experience that got him interested in all this in the first place. Has your opinion on him evolved at all over the last year?
I really haven't had much dealings. I know I did ask one question because I have a contact who's very close to him. I asked the thing about the secret space program. There's always this controversy. I said, ask Jim, is there a secret space program? And the answer that came back was, we have advanced technology. We don't have that. But his experience was really not negative. It was very sort of traumatic. He had for people who don't know, Jim Semivan is an experiencer. I mean, he had this situation where in the early 1990s, he wakes up.
Just sorry to interrupt, but you believe that. I mean,
I heard
just
it
to put it bluntly, to ask it bluntly, you know.
Yeah, I heard from two different sources that told me the story. And so the story was, and he basically, when he had the interview with Melinda Leslie, he also confirmed it to Melinda Leslie. She asked him about it. But the story is basically in the 1990s, he wakes up, his wife is bleeding. These beings are in the room. He described them, and I'm not going to say what they look like. They're not the normal type beings. He saw the beings. The next thing he remembered, he was in the front yard, and this thing was taking off. He's in his pajamas. And this is the story that I was told. He went to Ron Pandolfi, the supposed head guy, and he said, I had this experience last night. I need to know what's going on. And Ron says, you don't have a need to know. And he said, I don't have a need to know. Let me tell you what, Ron, you bring your boss's boss in here and we'll see who doesn't need to know. What I was told was that Tennant was brought in and Tennant said, leave it alone. Pretend it's a one-off. This will ruin your career. Do not touch this. And Jim listened to this. And what I was told is that in 2008, he retired from the CIA and he got a briefing as to what was going on. And it was at that point that he was allowed to deal with the UFO community. Before then, he was told he was not allowed to deal with any experiencers because he was very interested in experiencers. That's why I acknowledge that Nolan may have a very honest reason for running this, because once you're an experiencer and you've had it, you're down the rabbit hole. You're trying to figure this thing out. Your number one priority is not how much money the U.S. military can make and that kind of thing. You're just trying to figure it out for yourself. And I think that's Jim Semivan's main occupation, is he's trying to figure it out for himself. What happened to me that night in the early 1990s when these beings were in his room?
Well, let me make something clear, Frank. I don't think Nolan's a bad guy. And I do think, like Grant said, he had experience and he's trying to figure this out. You have to go to Green and Putoff. Are they terrible people? No. But what my point is simply this. They've worked under the umbrella of national security their whole lives, okay? And they were involved in some top programs. Do they know everything? No. But I guarantee you they know more than most because of whatever they were working on. They had cross-references with other agencies, agreeing especially. So my point simply is that they're not going to give these secrets out. They're not.
Exactly.
They're never have. That's not their intentions. And my second point is yeah, they're working on things. I believe Hal legitimately wants to make the world a better place. I'm not saying that's wrong either, but the funding comes from our government. That's where the money comes in, somewhat private industry too, through stocks, private companies that now, like I said, I believe has been created by our government itself. So they're working on their technology and their beliefs and their things. I mean, Hal told me he feels he has the best, whatever paper and theory to create warp drive, okay, yeah, of everybody. He believes that, and I believe he believes that, and it may be true. But you can't get it off the ground if you don't get the money. So am I saying that Hal and Green and Nolan are bad people? No. But they fall under the security apparatus, the umbrella of national security. They're not going to break that oath for two reasons. The big reason is they're not going to give out secrets so other countries and other people can use it. That's the biggest reason of all.
Yeah.
So,
okay. I appreciate your points there, and you ticked off Nolan, who's not with them anymore. You ticked off Green, who's not associated. I'm sure that there's some sort of consortium, and they might contact each other. But Putoff is still involved in TTSA. Grant, you seem to like Semivan. I mean, who's the bad guy in that organization?
I think everybody's doing their thing. I don't see any of them as bad guys. I think they're all just doing what they think is right. Even there's the thing where Hal Putoff talked about when he starts this lecture at the remote viewing conference, and he says, I've given lots of lectures on remote viewing. I've never given a lecture on UFOs. until now, because it's opened up and now I'm allowed to talk about it. And he's asked a question by Joe Bookman at the very end. And this is a question that's pointed at John Alexander. And John Alexander always said, I've talked to the deputy and the heads of all the 3-letter agencies, and they all say nothing's going on. And so he says, the question is basically an indirect question, and said, well, why did you're friends with John Alexander? Why does John always maintain that there's nothing? And he said, well, when you're under security, even if a person's your friend, you do not tell them because it's classified. So yes, these people are controlled by, if they get into a classified program, that they can't talk about certain aspects of the program. But I think that's part of the game they have to play. But in terms of the fact, my experience with all these guys is they are just absolutely trying to figure this thing out. And when you get into the government, then you have the aspect that people want to have big budgets, and you have the manipulation. But in terms of, especially if a guy's an experiencer, I have a great respect for them. The fact that they need money. I mean, you don't, if you're running, if you're Eric Davis or Hal Puthoff or stuff like that, you're not working for free like you and I. I mean, they want contracts. Yes, they want that kind of stuff. But in terms of, I think they're honest people who are trying to figure out what's going on, and they're governed by the rules and regulations, because they have to take the lie detectors. And if you lose your security clearance, it's game over. You're finished. You simply do not step across that line.
Not only that, but you have to understand, there's no doubt something weird happened to Skinwalker, okay? And you have Harry Reid in the middle of this giving funding out. I mean, and think of that. That goes back to my point. They went to Reid, who got 2 other senators to sign off to get some funding to do this. Reid's letter said, we want to make this an SAP project. So we're going to keep this under special access, okay? Yeah. They had the military up there. So the DOD had to authorize. You just don't call up somebody at the Pentagon and say, hey, I want a squad of special operations guy to pop into this ranch. This was all coordinated. So is there something going on? I don't disagree. But ultimately, the secret is going to stay hidden because of one reason, whether we like it or not. The world is what it is. Nobody trusts nobody in these different countries, even the people with money and power, okay? And whoever can, like you said earlier, Grant, can control this will control whatever, the world. And maybe even further, if they can understand this phenomenon, how it travels and everything else, God only knows what that could lead to.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
But they're not going to tell us. Don't wake up tomorrow and think you're going to get a New York Times article saying that we're not alone. Now, the interesting thing was that what NASA just did do, that scientist came out and said we may have been visited, a long time ago. And Davis, on an interview he did with us on Phenomenon, said, think of it this way, where we could have gotten some of this technology. We went to the moon and left behind our technology. What if something came here? Or I think he basically implied something did come here and leave their technology when they visited planet Earth how many thousands of years ago.
Yeah.
So have they probably uncovered things? They've studied the pyramids. They've studied all this technology. Do they have stuff? Yes. But ultimately, do they have all the answers? Probably not. And do they need more money to work on this? Yes. But I think my bottom line is don't expect to get disclosure. Confirmation. Now, I understand, Grant, your point, disclosure is we had a program. But confirmation is, what is it? What are we dealing with? Is what Bigelow said. Don't expect those answers.
And Bigelow, you see, they're almost following his pattern. That's where he said, are you in favor of disclosure? No. I'm in favor of confirmation. You need to say UFOs exist and stop right there. That's exactly what they did last December 16th. So it's almost like Bigelow is part of this. That's the program. But Bigelow added on, he said, then a couple of years down the road, then you can bring in stuff like aliens and stuff like that. So that may be the next thing where they're doing this thing. They move step 1, step 2, step 3, and have this program, which may not be working out very well because they didn't gather the money they thought they were going to gather. There's these delays, the same thing as before. It was going to be January and then it was February and now it's March and it keeps going back and stuff. But if they do have 200 videos, I mean, everything changes. Then you've got to say, I mean, they're disclosing something. If they have, and I've heard some of the videos are up close. So We'll see what happens if they move this kind of stuff out. The problem that they're facing now is the problem they had when I put out Managing Magic, is they made a lot of promises and nothing happened. And then it even got to the point just before, the couple days before that big release at the New York Times, there was actually a posting, a tweet or a Facebook posting by Tom DeLonge where he went, "Oh, ugh, they want another delay." And it was almost like Tom DeLonge had given up on it. And then a couple days later, boom, the thing dropped. But Tom DeLonge was getting frustrated, and that's the whole point, is when you delay it and you drag it out the way they are, whatever their claims are for why there's all these delays, it makes people very suspect, and you can't blame people.
And you lose momentum with the public if that's part of their equation, and you lose momentum politically, because it doesn't take much to knock this this type of thing out of the box. It really doesn't.
Well, Frank, let me put something to you. If what I was told is true, and what's going on with the technology that they're aware of, and the videos they have, they'll get their funding. That's all I'm going to tell you. They're going to get their funding, and they're going to go on their way. And they're going to leave DeLonge with the basket of eggs that are rotten. And the whole experiencer thing, that's a whole different thing that I was shocked it's come out so early, because I was told that would be the last thing they would ever get into.
Well, they themselves aren't mentioning it too much directly. Yeah, that's something that's kind of percolating around in amongst us UFO aficionados. But
did you read Jacobs's book? Did you read what they talk about in there?
I did. Yeah.
That's more than enough to cause a huge problem.
And we should mention that Gary Nolan gave a lecture at Harvard University, and it wasn't a black ops lecture. It was anybody could sort of walk in there. So I mean, that's what I'm saying. Kit Green ran around, talked about the program, and they talked about you, and then Nolan gives a lecture. I mean, it's not exactly like they're covering this thing up.
Right, and the experiencer thing is the most scariest thing of it, because of the fact what does it really mean? They've left this hanging out there. Are the people that are experiencing this, are they affected after they have this experience? Or is it because there's something different about them that causes them to have this experience? How are they targeted? Just like you said with Simivan, he was CIA. Was he targeted by a phenomenon, or was it some kind of our own technology that we're altering the frequencies and stuff, and it activates something in somebody that most people wouldn't be affected by? People are different.
Let me ask you, John, what do you think? You had the experience. What do you think in terms of, you're a personal guy that's in it? We're not in it.
With the program itself?
Well, with your experience, like in terms of, all the stuff that you've been told, in terms of, them contacting you, and what do you think's going on? Do you think
Here's my problem, Grant. This is what I had a problem with them from day one. Okay. When Green came and visited Pat in Mississippi and wanted to meet with me. Okay. And then he met, and then they were really, really focused on the DNA part. And I wouldn't sign off on it because there's no way to confirm it. In other words, when you get told, I'm the only one and there's one other lab in the world that can do this, how do you verify? Do you know what I mean? Trust but verify. How do you back this up? And they wanted my DNA so bad that the next day, even when I told them no, they flew Nolan in from California to Vegas, and he drove down with Colin Kelleher to Flagstaff, Arizona, to try to convince me to give me my DNA.
Yeah.
What was the time frame for that, John? When did that happen?
That would have happened in July of 2013.
Okay. It goes back a little ways, timeline wise.
Right, and I turned them down, and it caused a huge problem. And then I got everything I wanted, as far as I got a letter from Green for the DOD, the VA, to tell them exactly what I was exposed to, what affected me, what to do. They took care of all that. And then I find out from Alexander that, they asked you for your DNA, didn't they? I said, yeah, and I didn't give it to him. He goes, what are you, an idiot? He goes, when they did that surgery, what do you think they got? They not only got your blood, but they got your tissue. So they got what they needed to study whatever you were exposed to and injured by, okay? And then Green came back to me later and visited me again and told me to work, I've talked about this before, on certain things. And then he said, would I give him the DNA? And at that point, I said, sure. I'm alive. I'm being taken care of as far as the VA goes and everything else. Sure, I'll go into your 100-person study. And I know a lot of people get upset about like, well, I had an experience, why aren't I involved? Because this is what I was told. Believe it or whatever you want to take from it. They know about a bunch of events that have taken place. Most of them have never been declassified. Elizondo told me when he met with me, there are people that have had stuff happen to them, including the skinwalker. They've had issues. And unfortunately, these are all classified projects, and they're having a hard time getting the treatment and what they need to get taken care of from this, okay? So I agreed to go in the study. They can verify incidents in the military. They have your medical history. They have your physicals. They have everything else. So they can track you a lot better, okay? Now, what I also was just told recently was because I have a pacemaker, they can't do the antenna part, okay? You have to do an MRI on the brain.
Yeah.
Understanding.
Now, the report is on the speech that Nolan gave at Harvard in late November. It was basically, sounds innocuous enough that basically he's saying that he has identified the part of the brain where intuition comes from. Basically, we've got a speech sector in the brain, we've got a vision sector, and he's saying that he's found the intuition segment of the brain. That's basically the way I understood it. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Well, what I could tell you is this: go back in time, and I can't think of the guy's name now. He wrote a whole series of stuff on Green, and it was called something Mind Trap, and it was what they did up in.
That was Tard
Beckham.
and somebody else wrote that book.
Beckham wrote it. Okay.
I'm
it
sorry.
was an article by
I'm thinking
Beckham.
Mind Race. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
A
right,
different
right.
book. Sorry
Okay,
about
now
that. Sorry
listen.
about
Green went to China and worked with the Chinese scientist on this. Okay.
Yao was his name.
Yeah, and if you notice, a Chinese scientist just disappeared in China because of genetics that they're working on. Okay. He just disappeared. He came out with some controversial thing they were doing. I forget exactly what it was. And then he's disappeared and nobody knows where he is. Well, Green goes to China, okay, which is supposed to be our arch enemy, and goes to them with this technology. And they work on this together. And then they come back and they're trying to use it as Skinwalker. Okay? And from what I understand, and Knapp talked about this, he was even used as a decoy. They would sit people out in this area where stuff was, just to see what would happen. Different people to see, and they were using this technology to try to see if it showed up, why it showed up, and how it interacted with whatever, who was there, the people that were there that were being tested.
Wait, what kind of technology?
Go back and read the article. An MRI, they had technology within the brain, and they could study it. They could actually monitor people as they were trying to monitor people on real time when they had the interactions with the phenomenon.
Okay. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, but they identify in the Kit Green article from 2008. They identify a different part of the brain than Nolan is identifying now, and I would say it's going to be much more complex because it goes back to this thing that this is intuition. Well, intuition is non-local. That part of the brain is local. I say it can't. So the mind is using that part of the brain. There's action in that part of the brain. And there's actually was research done in Canada with Ingo Swann. And this is at Laurentian University. And there they had doing the same thing with the MRI, what part of the brain lights up when Ingo Swann is on target. And they showed it was much more complex. They were doing the thing with the Schumann's resonance, 7.8, that when Ingo Swann hit a target, he had the brain, the frequency of 7.8.
He was dialed into the Earth frequency.
Wasn't Persinger involved in that?
Yeah, Persinger was running that experiment. And that links up with, if the guy that put off the award at the remote viewing conference is Dr. Bankston, William Bankston, sociologist, and he has this training thing, this energy healing thing that he uses. And I've actually written a paper which I can give anybody that wants on this whole thing. And he says when they claim to be the Cadillac of healing for cancer. If there's no radiation or chemotherapy, they claim they can cure any kind of cancer. And when they ran the MRI with the patient and with the healer, and when they hit, when it comes, both the patient and the healer go into this Schumann's resonance. It's either 7.8 or double or triple, and they show the actual MRIs where the patient and the healer actually link up, and they don't even have to be in the same room. And so you have this thing. That's why I'm saying it's going to be much more complex. You have the Schumann's resonance, and you have, so it's not going to be simply this part of the brain is creating, say, intuition. That part of the brain is being used, but I will maintain what Eben Alexander maintains: consciousness is not in the brain.
Now, it's been a while since I looked at that, but the 7.8, I believe, is relates to the frequency of the brain waves. And that is a pretty low frequency. Like, let's say us now sitting here talking to one another, we might be up near 40, somewhere in that area. 7.8 is pretty low. That is not a normal functioning state of consciousness, if I remember my reading from back in the day on that correctly.
Yeah, so that would be like quieting the mind, like a meditation, or
very
getting
quiet.
into that
very
alpha.
Quiet.
Yeah.
Right,
And that may be what it is. So it's much more complex than one part of the brain is doing this.
That's why Green wanted me to start doing that stuff. And that's what the key that I think they believe is to some of this, and the experiencers, whatever we're experiencing, is we have that ability to go down to that frequency, which tells me that they also understand that whatever it is dialing into the earth itself, the earth energy field itself.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where it surprises me. Like I've given you the tape. I think all you guys have the tape where Kid Green, where you hear the Kid Green, and you realize when you hear him talking with this intuitive, I mean, they know a lot more than what they're putting out. I mean, they have a pretty good, somewhat of an idea of what's going on.
Well, the biggest thing is whether they've actually been able to real time, when the phenomenon is present, see somebody, an experiencer or whatever, and actually dial into them and see what happens. They're trying to figure out what effects people have had with interactions with this, the effects on the DNA. They're trying to look at the mind itself, how this plays into it. The next step would be to bring people together that have had these experiences and try to see who they could find that would bring this phenomenon in.
Well, that's what we need to do. We need to get some good remote viewers in on this and
no,
have them.
Frank, they already know. Frank, let me just tell you this. This is going to sound wacky. They already have a pretty good idea who they want and what they want to do and when they want to do it.
No, I'm talking about us doing it so we can figure out what they're up to.
You have to have somebody. You have to have somebody. Okay, I'll give you an example. Okay, I'm going to spill the beans on something that's happened to me. Okay, and I can't explain it. But here's exactly what happened when I was in Sedona. Okay, I'm not going to go into who I was with, but they worked with inside the government at one point. They took me to an area where there was known activity that goes on out there. Matter of fact, the government at one point had actually bought a ranch up there that was a lot like Skinwalker, called the Bradshaw Ranch. They actually took it over, bought it, had people on it, kept people restricted from it for years. There's also rumors there was a EM facility up there, which I know there was some kind of government facility up there because it was assigned to Luke Air Force Base where I was stationed at. Okay, but they had me come out to this area. Now, this person said normally to get an interaction with something, you have to do like the CE5 where you have to meditate and all this other stuff. And I said, okay, so we went out there and we were out there for a while. And nothing happens. And then all of a sudden, like when we're going to pack it in, we were out there maybe 45 minutes to an hour. It was cold. And they said, well, we should have probably meditated first. All of a sudden, 2 minutes, temperature dropped 10 degrees.
Wow.
EM meter that this person had, they had the temperature and EM, and the EM meter pegged. And then the show started.
Yeah.
And it was unbelievable what took place. And when I've been asked before if I've ever had an experience like Bentwaters, that wasn't an experience like Bentwaters, okay? I was just on duty, went out into the field, something happened twice, right? Second one was a little bit weirder than the first. This was all of a sudden there it was. There was stuff in the sky. There was stuff going on. Okay. And when we finished, there was video of it. Okay.
Oh, wow.
First has video of the stuff that was in the sky, to include triangular objects. And when this was going on, they were saying there's something blue above us, and they've got the video of that. And when we went back and looked at all this, then that person looked at me, because they were in the remote viewing program and everything else, and said, I cannot believe that you're not inside the government program working on this right now. So,
John, is that who I think it is?
who?
Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about.
You have no idea who I'm talking about.
Okay,
You
okay.
have no idea who this person is. Okay. I'm just telling you, I don't lie. I don't make it up. You could guess 1,000 guesses and you'll never figure out who this person is. Okay. But what I'm getting at is, I'm not saying what happened was because I have the ability to draw it in, but something showed up. But what I'm saying is, they've gone to this level that they have people that they know can have stuff come in. But now, Grant, I think, haven't you said that you think it's everywhere? But I think it's still certain points on the earth that this stuff is more prevalent than others.
But it seems to follow you around. That's why I'm saying at least they're on the right pattern. Instead of just looking at UFO sightings or metal, they're dealing with the people who are interacting with the phenomenon. You have some contact. The same as, if you remember, John Alexander writes his second book, and he writes one whole chapter on Chris Bledsoe, who's a good friend of mine for years. And he tells the story how he gets asked on one interview. They said, why would you go talk to Chris Bledsoe? He's on the other side of the country. Why would you go and talk to him? And John hesitates, and he goes, my sponsor asked me to go and see him. So he goes there and he tells this story. He writes an entire chapter in the book about it, where he's standing with Chris Bledsoe at the top of the hill where Chris had the first experience in 2007, this dramatic thing with the aliens and the 14 UFOs and all this kind of stuff. And he's sitting there and they're leaning against the car. And all of a sudden Chris says, they're here. And John says, what do you mean they're here? They're here. I know they're here. They're around. And John says, well, how do you know that? He said, I just know, John. I know they're here. And John says, boom, this thing appears over his head and goes flying off. And John said he wrote an entire chapter. He was just blown away by this. And that's the whole thing. If you want to know how the experience works, you go to people like you or Chris or somebody, people who are interacting with the phenomena, because they don't seem to be talking to the government, but they are interacting with people. And that's the only way I say that you're going to figure it. And at least Green and Nolan and these guys are on the right track. They're talking to the right people and asking the right questions.
Grant, really quick, you've met Bledsoe, right? You know this guy a little bit.
Yes, a couple times, yes.
Oh, okay. Now, a number of years back, he did a show. I believe it was a MUFON show when Carrion was still running MUFON.
Yep.
And Carrion was like the lead investigator, and they went down there. And to be blunt about it, he came off very badly on that show. Can you explain all that?
He came off badly on the lie detector. When you do a lie detector, you basically go with one question, and that's the best. If you look in the more questions you ask on a lie detector. So what happened? They went down there and they asked him. They were supposed to meet at his house. He's sitting there waiting for them to come to the house, and then they phone and they say, "Can you come? We need you to come to the hotel." So he walks in. He walks in the front door of the hotel, and they said, "We want you to come in this room." And they walked in, and the lie detector guy was there. And he was just shocked, like, what's going on here? And he was asked 33 questions. It went on for 3 hours, a lie detector for 3 hours. And they said that he was evasive on one of the questions. I mean, nobody gives a lie detector for 3 hours. They just took him totally off. So when they got the files, then Chris went back and he said, I want all the files. They didn't have a single file. They've lost all the files on this whole case. So you have what they have. I mean, I've been with him. I was with him with an event that happened when I was with him, almost like John. It was one of the most bizarre things that ever happened in my life. I can name a pile of people who have had healing. He healed somebody right in front of me in Maine. I've seen him do all these weird things. I've seen videos, lots. He's got piles and piles and piles of videos. He actually gave me he allowed me to use it. I said, well, I really don't know how to analyze these videos. They have these professors from universities. I'm pretty sure the White House House has been involved with him, all the intelligence agencies. I've seen some of the films of the videos where they set him up underneath this tree, and they've got this, they're filming the whole thing, they're taping it, these university professors. There's a lot of stuff that people really don't know about his story. I can just say for myself, I was with him when I saw it. I've seen the whole story, and that one bad thing, but it was basically the part that people don't know. It was 33 questions, and I think they asked it for 3 times. It went for 3 hours, that lie detector test. He was totally blown away by how they set this whole thing up.
So did you ask him about that show? Because basically it's the major video document of him and his claims. And, you know, again,
but there's nothing. All it was the lie detector. The rest of the show was just his story.
Okay.
The problem, Frank, is here, this, in all honesty. Okay, you have things that happen that you can't explain. Okay, like Ben Waters, what happened up that night in Sedona. Okay, it's easy because you don't have any reference point to whatever you see or whatever you have to discredit it or to say, well, it's an unknown. Ultimately, the best you're ever going to get out of these videos and stuff is it's an unknown, because no one's given the data out to what the unknown could be known. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But what I do know is this. I was told that some of the people from Skinwalker, military-wise, were followed too after their encounter they had, and had encounters afterwards that left the ranch and had some stuff, to include a Navy intel officer that had issues, to including the fact that it affected his family also.
But that's very common, John. I mean, that's where they're hyping this stuff like it's this hitchhiker, and these guys had this stuff, wine bottles flying around the room, and their roommates had to move out. It was so dramatic. That happens with almost every single experiencer. It happened in the Canadian government case with the Canadian government was using a woman by the name of Frances Swan. This is in this 1975 documentary that was done by Robert Emenegger. The story about she teaches this Navy intelligence guy how to channel, how to talk to this alien by the name of Alpha. He goes back, and Jacques Vallée gave me the document. Goes back to the National Photographic Interpretation Center, where Art Lundahl, who was the guy before Kit Green, that had the job before Kit Green, was very interested in UFOs, and they do this channeling thing where this alien or the ship flies by in the open window, and Robert Friend does it on the documentary, and he said it was the most dramatic thing he'd ever seen in Blue Book. So they teach this guy to do this.
That was in the Emenegger documentary, right?
That was in the Emenegger documentary. So she teaches this Navy intelligence guy how to do it. And then there's this article comes out, and I went back to Frances Swan to confirm this. This guy comes back in the 1980s, and he said, they're all over me. Get rid of them. I can't get rid of them. They're driving me crazy, whatever. And she said, I told you not to deal with the evil ones. And she starts on this thing. So this hitchhiker thing, in fact, Linda had the story. It was told on your show, John, about this guy from Nebraska who was this priest guy, where the guys come and they're interacting with the nine, the aliens, the nine, this guy from the CIA that brought Uri Geller to America, and they're doing this sort of thing, and it goes south. And they come they come to this Roman Catholic priest, and they say, "Can you stop this?" And it sort of they were trying to weaponize the information they were getting, and it had all gone south on them. And they're trying to get this guy to stop it. So this hitchhiker phenomena is very common. Everybody,
well, right. And the channeling part, Grant, in my hypnosis, in '88 that was done, and guess who was behind it? Was partly behind it was Emenegger. Was behind it in the group, including some people in technology. Anyway, I actually channeled to the whatever it was that we dealt with. It's weird.
I'll add a piece to that story. Emenegger was, like in all these things, you have the intelligence guy and then you have the worker. Emenegger was just a worker. He was just the guy who wrote the music and wrote the scripts and all this kind of stuff. It was Alan Sandler who was the CIA connection. And when your interview took place, I'm pretty sure it was the same one. They said we need someone to do a regression. We need somebody. And Emenegger said, hang on, let me make a phone call. And he phones the CIA, and they got 2 guys immediately, just boom, like that. And that's where a lot of this stuff is coming in.
And the thing is that I channeled to whatever it was. I had a conversation with it. It's freaky. That's why I'll never.
What was the experience about that? Can you talk about that?
No, I won't. Because if you think Rendlesham is a mess just let that video.
Yeah, that'll stir things up. I guess.
Oh yeah, no, I've kept that quiet. The only part.
Well, let me ask you this then, John. Now, was it positive? Did you go that far?
The only thing I'll tell you, it's out there on the internet. There was a clip that Linda put out. She did it in a presentation where I was asked a question as I was talking to it, and the life form was the energy itself that we were dealing with there.
Yeah.
That is actually, but I actually was, believe it or not, whatever you want to do with hypnosis, and that's why I'm very careful. I actually was channeling to whatever this was. And it made the circles inside the intelligence agencies because I got told later. And Emma Nager was in the middle of it. And the other thing that you may not know, Grant, was Rendlesham was supposed to go on that UFO cover-up live.
Oh, yeah.
But they pulled it. They had better plans for it, they said, down the road.
Did Green or Nolan ever comment on your? Did they see that channeling thing? Did they have any comment?
No,
on it?
Green and Nolan, but Putoff knew all about it. When I met with him, we were talking about it. So Putoff knew all about the video, and he was briefed on it way back in the 80s.
Interesting.
So I don't know what to make of this, guys. There's something to it, but I guess at the end of the day, my final analysis is we're not going to get a straight answer, I don't think, for a long time.
Yeah,
But
we're
getting
getting
to what
some answers
Frank-
from you, though.
Yeah,
Huh?
yeah, absolutely. And getting to what Frank was saying, let's say that your encounter in Sedona, how would you perceive that? I mean,
It was simply what he just said Alexander saw happen. There was stuff everywhere.
yeah,
There was stuff in the distance. Then some of it got closer. Then there was something over us. And then the pictures and everything that were taken showed that some of it was triangular objects that you couldn't see with the naked eye. And there was 2 large triangular objects along with some of the smaller blue objects. And then there's whatever this was, it was counterclockwise changing color that was over the top of us.
Will we ever get
And
to see that, or is that classified?
That's not
or
my
is it-
stuff. That was taken by the person that was there.
But that's in private hands, though, not in the military hands.
Oh, well.
You can't say that. Okay.
Look, no, guys, look, man. Here's my point. If there's
he's
something
still
of
operational.
if there's something of relevance, the military has their hands on it. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all I'm trying to say. My
Have you
point
had
is,
any encounters like that since?
no, that was the only time that we went to that spot a couple other times and saw strange stuff in the sky and towards Cottonwood. But that night was the night that, like I said, the temperature dropped 10 degrees within 2 minutes. The EM meter pegged, and it was just like it went from dead nothing to stuff was everywhere. And this went on for a good 30 to 45 minutes.
Do you think
And
they
I-
want
Yeah.
to use people to bring this phenomena in? Or have you heard like where they put George Knapp in the middle of the field? Do you think they have ideas to put experiencers and try to attract the phenomena?
Okay, let me just give you a hypothetical for now. Okay, if this is all real, okay, and I say if because I got no way to prove this. So I'm not 100% behind anything. Trust but verify, right? But yeah, wouldn't that be the logical thing to do with whatever it is? Eventually, get the best candidates, whoever they are, you know what I mean, together in a certain spot when you know something's going on and see what happens. Is all my point is. That's all
I
I'm
hate to
getting.
use this analogy, but if you want to catch a fish, you got to use the right bait.
Well, that's what I told Knapp. I told Knapp when I got the story behind the scenes. I said, you were being used, George. But here was the other interesting thing, though, that you guys may not know about. Okay, Grant, you may know. Davis, when I went down there and met with Putoff, they were pushing for my DNA again, and I told them no at that point. But Davis had an experience, and he actually talked in a different language. He got close to it, and something happened to him and affected him. And so they're telling me this, and then I look at him and I says, so what has come back on your DNA stuff? And it was like when he was telling me, he was like in a trance and he snapped out of it and he says, well, we haven't gone that far with me yet. And I go, wait a minute. You were on the ranch. You had an interaction with this. You were having stuff spew out of your mouth, like communications type stuff that you don't know what it is for sure. And you're not in the study and you're not trying to figure out what and how it affected you. And you wouldn't give me a straight answer after that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something that people forget is that when they talk about Skinwalker Ranch, it wasn't that everybody was having experiences, because George said he didn't have any experiences, but the main guy who was having the experiences was Eric Davis. And that would make sense that it's attracted to, it may be at the spot, but it's attracted to him because he had this daylight sighting in whatever it was, 1991, when he graduated with his PhD at his graduation party. He tells that story about him and his wife seeing this boomerang object come over. So it doesn't, just because you're a Skinwalker Ranch doesn't mean you're going to see something. It seems to have something to do with the individuals as well.
It does. It appears, and that was the quote, to catch a Skinwalker.
Yeah.
They're trying to figure out how to communicate with this. That part I believe. There's something to this, and they want to figure out how to communicate with this, and whatever else they've got on their mind, I don't know. But what I do believe they are, and I think they're looking for people that can do that. That much I believe.
Do you think it'll go to the black, or do you think that Nolan and Valet and people will be able to keep it in the white?
Here's what I was told. They don't want this to go to the black, but again, what doesn't go black if it's a national security issue?
Yeah.
I'm just telling you, that's my point. Think about all these programs. They just, okay, let me give you an example. Let's say whatever this is, they could communicate with it. Would that not be huge?
That'd be insane. I mean,
And would not
another thing is how is it doing the communication? Is this a natural talent, like let's say comparing possible ET psychic ability to say something like a dolphin, which can use echolocation, or is it a technology that they have that allows them to do that?
Well, that's why they're studying the DNA in the brain, in my opinion.
Can I ask, how do you stop Nolan? I can see you can stop Put Off because he's got, contracts and stuff, but how do you stop Nolan if he decides he's going to go public and he's going to put it out through peer-reviewed papers? How do you shut him down?
Okay. This is where I don't want to speculate too much. Okay. They kept the nuclear bomb. They brought these scientists in, and all of a sudden they took them underground and they developed a nuclear bomb. Okay, I would have no idea exactly where or how the government would handle this, but to me, they always find a way to keep things covered up to their benefit. So I can't tell you exactly how or what, and I don't believe Nolan is, so I make it clear in case he listens to this, I don't believe he's part of the government program. But how many times does the government come in and fund these scientists and give them money, don't tell them exactly what they want, then they do the work and they take it and say thank you very much and move on. And they have somebody else analyze it and take it from there. And only the best of the best, when there's no one else out there that can put it together and stuff, is brought into the inner circle, and then you have to be real careful with them. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's a good point. I don't know.
Because Nolan told me that he wanted to do it right. It was going to take 2 years, and there was going to be a peer-reviewed paper. Do you think if the peer-reviewed paper comes out, they can still move it around and move it back into the other world?
One of two things. They can block the paper for national security issues, or they can do what you say, plausible deniability. They can put something out there that makes them look crazy, and no one will believe them anyway.
Or they can just read it and take it to whatever level they want to take it.
Well, think about this. How many people took Put-Off's paper serious in 2010 or 11 and really looked at it very closely, but now that they came out last year with all this into the stars, now more people are looking at that technology. And Warp Drive and all these articles have started to come out, and the plasmas and all that other stuff. But up until 2-3 years ago, none of this was headline news. But now all of a sudden it is. And it's starting to gain traction. Different articles are being written about it. The technology is being talked about. But none of that's being discussed under the ET or UFO phenomenon or UAP phenomenon. It's just advances in technology and where things are going. And could we go to the stars using this technology?
Can I ask John a question? Have you heard about the cosmic group, cosmic club? How many people are in it? Who's involved? What they're up to?
No, I haven't. I haven't heard anything about that.
Well, Grant, what do you know about it?
Well, I heard there was, Semi Van had mentioned more. If I heard 40, 50. Diane Pasulka has talked about this sort of group where, academics, it's almost the idea of the Avery. It's not an actual group. It's just a bunch of people who find comfort in talking to people, almost like an experiencer group for high level academics and scientists where they can talk privately among themselves without being outed. That's my impression of what these guys are. And
sounds like an invisible college kind of thing.
Yeah, and the numbers seem to be getting bigger every time I hear about it. And
Well, it's like a think tank, then, is what you're saying.
Yeah, where they can sort of talk. I've heard Kreipel and Pasulka, and there's a religion professor from Harvard, and where if they want to move in there, and Jacques Vallée, Diane Pasulka's good friends with Jacques Vallée. So you've got these connections where if they need something, they can come in to an academic and talk to an academic about, can you help us with this or that? They're not officially a part of anything. And they're trying to, just like you and I, they're trying to, get as close to it as they can without getting dragged in and sworn to secrecy and find out what's going on, because you sort of trying to figure out who's got the answers and where can you figure out, because you're trying to figure it out yourself.
Right. No, it makes sense. You have the brightest of the bright get together and think. But I mean, if you go back and look at the NASA stuff, there's stuff 40 years ago, 30 years ago that they were talking about to include global warming or climate change and why we needed to get off this planet, why we needed to go forward, some of the things that could happen. And these think tanks were getting together every year. And when I confronted Davis about that, he said he knew the majority of the people that were involved in these programs. And then when he got older, he was involved. So, yeah, there's no doubt. I'm sure they're working on all this stuff.
Yeah, Davis is a key guy that I think you got to watch. I mean, he, from my experience, he knows a lot more, and he's more obsessed with this subject than probably any of us are. He's really into it, and he's a smart guy, and he's got an intelligence background, and he's got a security clearance, and he's almost like Donald Trump. If he gets excited. I remember when he did the thing with George Knapp, where he said, the crash saucer program was 1989. They shut it down, and then George Knapp says, "I know what the headline is going to be tomorrow." It's like he gets going and he says things he probably shouldn't be saying. But he's a guy that I think you should watch. I think he knows an awful lot about. He's done a lot of digging from my experience with him as to trying for him to explain what the hell happened to me in 1991, and he's got the contacts that you and I may not have to get inside and ask questions.
Well, he has access to the brightest minds and the best of the best. I mean, Nolan's one of the top in his field for genetics. Okay. Yeah. Then you have Puthoff that ran Stargate and all this other stuff that's probably never been declassified yet, and then you have Kit Green that was in his small job was the Weird Desk, but his job was basically analyzing the Soviet technology, where they were, and technology advances to include the degrees he has. I don't even know how he has all the degrees he has. I don't, all the stuff that he's done in his lifetime. So these guys are some of the brightest people out there. But again, like I said, it's not that I think they're terrible people. It's just don't expect them to sit down with you and have a cup of coffee and tell you everything that's going on.
Yeah. Getting back to Davis really quick, not too long after one of his more speculative papers on advanced interstellar space travel came out, it got a little bit of a review from a guy named Sean Carroll, who's a professor at Caltech. And he had basically stated that he basically backed Davis up on the science, expressed a lot of skepticism in terms of its feasibility in anybody alive now's lifetime. But basically he backed him up on the science. Do you think something like that is at all helpful when somebody who's a pretty mainstream guy, does a lot of media appearances, write books, is that type of thing at all helpful towards
moving all this forward? We have to introduce it to the public. You have to start this slow process of introducing this to the public, okay, is all I'm getting at. And so I think that's what they're doing. Think about the movie Interstellar. What do they talk about? They talk about it ends up coming down to quantum physics and at the quantum level and it involves wormholes and black holes. So yeah, we're getting bits and pieces of it. Okay. But how much of that really has to do with what is it? A UAP, a UFO, aliens, ETs, whatever. I think that's my whole point. I think that this all the stuff that's coming out in the quantum computing abilities and advances in space and technology are a big deal. And who's doing it. But ultimately, again, we're only getting probably a quarter or less of all of it, and it's up to us to try to put it together to make sense of it.
Yeah.
We're working on it.
Yeah.
Right.
Peace.
Well, we've been at this for a little bit more than 2 hours now, and it's about time to wrap it up here in the East. Any final thoughts from anybody?
Oh, I just want to say, I feel that disclosure is not going to happen unless what Bigelow says was, and he made this comment, that eventually whatever we're dealing with is going to make itself known. Okay.
Yeah.
Then, yeah, that's when you're going to get disclosure. But again, all you're going to get is there's something there. The question is, what is it? What is it? What are we dealing with? What are these interactions taking place with people? And they clearly have an interest in the technology. So again, don't expect a lot other than drip, drip, drip. And it's something that sit back. It's like reading a book that's 800 pages long. Sit back for the long haul, because this ain't going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
Final thoughts?
I'd like to actually thank you guys for the panels that you're putting out. I mentioned to James before that, I'm getting sort of old, and John's not a young guy anymore. And there's always this complaint.
Neither am I.
Yeah, exactly. And there's always this complaint that there are no young people. And I'm very impressed with some of the panels that you guys have had with these young guys. And in fact, at the one point, I was listening to one I think you did last week or whatever, and I'm going, oh my God, these guys have stuff I haven't heard. I mean, it was like new stuff, because almost never is there somebody brings out stuff. You guys are really on top of this thing. And these discussions that are taking place on these panels and stuff are sort of on the leading edge. I mean, and I started this in 75. It was just simple sightings in 75. There was no in-depth discussions. The discussion we've had tonight, the ones that you guys are having with these young guys who are really on the edge of this field and what's going on and what the government is doing and stuff like that. I just applaud these young guys that they're doing a fantastic job at this whole unraveling what's actually going on here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And don't forget Chant. We did break our gender barrier, so there's a gal in there too. And she's going in the right direction too. James, any final thoughts from you?
I'm glad, thanks so much, John and Grant, for coming on. Maybe we can do this sometime again. This got pretty good, especially towards the end. I definitely heard some stuff that I didn't hear before, especially from John. And we got a good spectrum over here. I really appreciate everybody's view here. John's approach is very unique, and so is Grant. So we got a great mix here.
Well, look at me this way. Remember the ending scene in Contact?
Yeah.
Where she sat there playing with the dirt, looking out to the sky?
Yeah.
That's me. And I think there's a lot of other people that are right there with me.
Oh, absolutely.
And at the end of the day, I don't claim to be an expert or anything else. I'm just a guy trying to figure out what the hell happened to me, and it's affected my life ever since then. And that's all I'm really trying to do. So
yeah, that's what I'm in it for. I'm interested in the phenomena. That's the main thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's where I think we got to remember with guys like, especially Green and Putoff. These guys are like 80 some years old. You can imagine what it's been like for them to all the years they've done it. This sort of desperation to try to figure it out before you leave.
Right.
Yeah. There you go. We'll figure out the afterlife when we get there.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, John and Jim, John and Grant. Sorry about that. We do have Jim Peniston coming on early next year, so that'll be a lot of fun. John and Grant, thanks so very much for joining us, and James, thanks for putting this together. And is this going to be our last show for the year or not?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think because I already spoke to Grant about doing one on Sunday.
Okay. Well, if we do that, then that'll be great. We'll have one more Christmas present for all our listeners. If not, I'm going to wish everybody right now a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. But I might get to do it again, and there's an unlimited supply of those to go around. So I'll do it again next time if we do come back on. But everybody, thanks for listening. And in the East, I know it might be past some of your bedtimes, so you have a great night, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, guys. Merry
Thank you,
Christmas
gentlemen.
to everybody.
Okay.
Happy holidays. Take care, everybody.
Yeah.
All right. That was awesome. That was 2 hours and 15 minutes, and it just flew by.
Oh yeah, man. That was a great discussion too. I mean, I'd never heard about that Sedona experience in detail.
It's because once again you open up another whole can of worms, because when you can't explain it, that's where you're vulnerable.
Well, John, was that were you with Tyler for that?
Was that what?
Was Tyler for that, or that's somebody completely
That's
different?
Diana's friend?
Yeah.
No, you guys have no idea who this person is.
Okay, fair enough.
I'm being straight.
I believe you. Yeah, I just wanted to ask that because I know you said I think you mentioned something about Sedona before, Tyler.
No, I just said that there's weird stuff that goes on up there and stuff, and there is. There's something to Sedona. I don't know what it is.
John, I'm telling you, we got to go out there. I want to go out there with you because, I'm doing the Engaging the Phenomenon project.
Uh-huh.
I'm launching that next year, and that's dealing with stuff like that because I had similar experiences, what you recalled, and there's stuff all over. I had that, and I had objective witnesses with me, and it's just incredible. And again, once you get involved with something like that, it's there's no turning back.
This is stuff near you, right, James? Hudson Valley?
Well, this happened to me. This particular experience that I'm talking about happened in 2012, 2013.
Yeah, but where?
Right in my backyard.
Yeah, Hudson Valley.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and my mom
that's
saw it.
kind of a weird place too, by a lot of accounts.
Well, absolutely, yeah, it is. The Hudson Valley is known for kind of weird, things, since Native American land and all that stuff.
See, that's some of that. I'll tell you this right now. There's something to this whole native thing. I haven't figured it out yet myself totally, but there's something to these areas, in the native part of it and everything else, and in certain areas like what is it, Dulce? They have stuff going on up there. You have different areas where there are burial grounds and all this other stuff.
Sure.
There is something to some of this, and just even Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah, after the whole place, yeah.
And Bentwaters has